From the second that you have your stress reaction, it takes 90 seconds for that chemical reaction to clear out of your body.
Every 90 seconds that you look back at the event and say, still a threat, I'm going to renew it.
I think most people are not aware that they're reaching burnout.
People are more productive when they don't freaking hate their bosses.
Can stress kill? It can 100% kill.
You will literally eat your internal organs alive.
Is there a different way that men and women deal with stress?
This is the reason why you're addicted to stress. You're escaping an uncomfortable emotion. Why are we doing this? When is enough?
Today we bring Mr. Mo again. This time with his partner in crime in writing this book, Unstressable. So I'm with Alice also. We had another long. I don't think I can have an interview with you that's not long. So I know it's a nice problem to have, guys. So enjoy. I hope you felt that you could really express yourself as much as you can, as you did in this book, or at least give it some effort to try, because this is a longer book, but we did.
It's a long book, and we went to loads of good different places. It was nice. It was
Yeah.
It was a
nice.
lovely
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Did you?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it.
And you? How was it, Mo?
You know me, man. Anything you say, I'm like, oh.
No, I really think it's going to help a lot of people.
I hope so. I really do.
And you will realize how stress is so unrecognizable, even with all the information we have and the knowledge in the internet, it's still unrecognizable. And I feel it's the first time, even me, to really be aware, because we really truly talked about something that seems that everybody understands what the word is, but when you really get into it, you realize how subtle and unrecognizable it could be, and you might lose even family or relationships or lack productivity just because of it. So I think it's something everybody will benefit from.
Happy you enjoyed it. We're always honored to be here.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Enjoy, guys, and find these people, support them, follow them, and always subscribe, and we'll give you good stuff like this. I always do that. Okay, so Mo, pleasure to have you back.
Thank you.
First time in English.
First time in English, but I have my best ally. So I'm when there is something I can't say, Alice will do it.
Yeah, I think it's nice because we've done a really good Arabic content, and today because we have Alice. Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Who co-wrote? Is that the right term? Co-wrote.
Yeah, co-authored, yes.
Co-authored the book with you about stress. So it's a pleasure to have both of you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, we're gonna have some nice questions. I think it's a topic that a lot of us need to talk about and understand, maybe more than anything. So I want to get right into it. Some questions are for both, some you, but you can always, of course, jump in. Well, because I don't know, sometimes you might add value on what she says. Okay, first one. What is stress?
What is stress?
Yeah. This is for any of you, or both.
Well, I mean, you define stress as machinery, right? But the simple term for stress, I define stress as a disconnection from safety. So it's your survival mechanism. And it's quite simply, those ancient, triggers we have in cave times would be for your stress response to go off. A tiger comes out of the bushes, your amygdala would alert everything in your body to say, set your atomic nervous system off, let's go into fight or flight, so that you can quite literally either run away from the tiger or, actually fight it if you're brave enough. And then once that system, has flooded you with cortisol, reconfigures you into being superhuman with noradrenaline, adrenaline, sends things like blood to your muscles and increases your heart rate and makes you basically more aware and able to do things in that moment. And then once the threat's over, you go back into parasympathetic state and it's all done and you should be calm. That's the biological sense of stress, but that's very much changed today. And so when I say it's a disconnection from safety, we can now in the modern world get stressed from what used to set the tiger coming out of the bushes stress, the upsetting email, you know, it's you thinking you're going to get told off by your boss, and that's a disconnection from safety in your system, thinking, this is stressful. Or, you know, it's an upsetting conversation with your partner. It's a WhatsApp notification that sends you over the edge that day. The modern world litters us with outside stresses, and then our internal reaction is our stress response, and how that actually goes into, well, we'll come on to this, but like 4 different types of stress.
Yeah, I have that here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Muhammad?
the thing I love most about writing that book with Alice is that we always look at everything in 2 almost entirely different ways. So when I looked at stress, when we decided to write about this, the first thing I did is I need to understand things in algorithms and numbers to be able to figure anything out. So the biological machinery of stress is very understood, like Alice said. You know, when you anticipate a threat, you reconfigure yourself to be superhuman. Cortisol, adrenaline, and stress hormones would get you there and then take you out. You know, they would fade very quickly, and then you're supposed to go back to calm. That does not explain why is it that we remain stressed this long, and why is it that certain things that stressed you in your 20s or stressed me in my 20s freaked me out, right? In my 30s become easier, and then in my 40s become easier, and when I face them in my 50s, I laugh about them, right? They're not easier, but I seem to be less stressed by them, if you know what I mean. And so when we started to write, I asked Alice to give me a couple of weeks to try and figure it out from an algorithmic point of view. And the easiest place to understand stress, believe it or not, at least for my strange mind, is physics. I understand physics really well. In physics, stress is not, when an object is stressed, it's not the result of the forces applied to the objects only. It's also the result of the square area, the cross section. How big is the cross section of the object to carry those forces? So if you know, in the Middle East, when they taught us this in I think it was primary school, they said this is why the camel's hoofs would not sink in the sand, because even though the camel is a ton of weight, it's distributed across a very large hoof, so it doesn't apply a lot of stress to the sand. Now take that and apply it to humans, and it's exactly the same, surprisingly. It is the sum of all of the challenges that are applied to you, divided by your cross-section, if you want, your abilities, your skills, your resources, your contacts, your experiences that enable you to deal with those challenges in a way that distributes them across all of your abilities, right? And it sounds simple. So basically, stress in humans is equal to the sum of all the challenges applied to you divided by your resources, skills, and abilities, right? And the algorithm sounds very simple, but it really shows something quite interesting, because while the stressors that are applied to you, the challenges, are not always within your control, right? We actually argue in the book that many of them are, but let's say that they come from outside you, right? The skills and areas and the skills and resources that you learn to deal with them are within your resources, and accordingly you are able to affect your state of stress. Even though something from outside you challenges you, you can choose to be stressed or not. You can learn over time to be less stressed. And so the slogan of the book was, it's not the events of your life that stress you, it's the way you deal with them that does. And once you get that concept clear, that life is going to continue to stress you. As a matter of fact, nowadays it stresses us, most of us, even more than we've ever been stressed before. The world is in such turmoil, right? And yet, if you continue to focus on learning the skills and resources, you can deal with it. The forces will be applied to you, but you wouldn't feel the stress.
There's that nice saying, I forgot the name, it's a very famous lady, but it's something along the lines that nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission.
True.
So no, I think the same applies. Nobody can make you, or nothing can make you really stressed without your permission.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess it's your resolution, your endurance,
your resilience, your
response.
No, not resilience.
Your
Resilience.
mindset,
Sorry.
Yeah. Your mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it was Viktor Frankl, wasn't it, who said, you know, the famous psychologist from Auschwitz, who said that there's a space between reaction, and in that space is your response, like your choice. And so
between the event and your reaction is a
there's
buffer.
that moment.
Yeah.
and that's when you get to choose if you're going to be stressed or if you're not.
But is it like, you know, when people impulsively react to something, maybe it's a bit of a side topic, but when somebody impulsively reacts, does that mean their emotional chemicals in their brain have hijacked all logic, and they actually can't, when they say, I couldn't help it, I had to break the TV, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, but you made the decision, but in his brain, he's thinking, no, like I really was out of control. I actually
That's probably true.
hit.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm asking. Is it true that they really didn't have that moment of like, I'm gonna break it? You know, like, you know
I think the most important question is, how did breaking the TV help? Right? so you know, something is annoying you because your boss is giving you a hard time. Now you broke the TV. Is the boss doing any better? I really don't know.
Yeah.
But I actually think it is
it's
chemically possible, right?
The practices, right, that you practice to just be calmer, whether it's like meditation, whether it's mindfulness and actually practicing consciously to be present in the moment, that rewires your brain to have that space, to be able to notice when you can take a pause and actually choose whether to break the TV or whether not to, or whether you can't, because the less you do that, the less you're mindful and practicing in the moment, practicing different, you know, meditations, different stress management practices, the more easily your brain is normalized just reaction. So that's when you can actually create space.
Yeah, I think it's important to explain though that we shouldn't blame someone who gets into that point. I mean, we should tell them life can be done better. But remember, cortisol and adrenaline are there to reconfigure your body for fight or flight. Okay, and Alice teaches quite a bit about, you know, trapped emotions and so on, right? The idea is if you're sitting there and making yourself angry with incessant thoughts over and over and over and over, but not releasing it, not doing anything about it, not solving the problem, there could actually be a chemical reaction that says fight or flight. And that fight response might not be directed at the thing that's annoying you. You just try to let it out by screaming or by breaking the TV or, you know, by punching the wall or whatever. It is sort of like overtaking you almost biologically.
What's the biggest misconception about stress?
Ooh, I think it's that we have to be stressed to be successful, or we have to be stressed to perform well, or that even being stressed is normal, because we have normalized stress being normal, and it's actually the opposite, right? Even today, things like anxiety is such a common term. The amount of people you hear just say, I feel anxious, I'm anxious. It's such a normal part of daily conversation. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I'm saying that it shouldn't be in the terms of not the conversation, but the reality. You know, this misconception that we perform better under stress is wrong. You know, we're actually 31% less productive when we're stressed than when we're calm and happy. You know, a study by Harvard showed that. And it's fascinating that today we really still are living in that sort of double side of people thinking, okay, I'm going to push my team, myself as much as possible. And being busy is seen as a status symbol. It's like, okay, well, if I'm busy, then I'm really wanted, I'm needed. And you call a friend and you're like, how are you? And the first thing they say is, I'm so busy. And you're like, why is that the answer instead of actually how you're feeling or how, you know, something else you're doing that doesn't glamorize overworking all the time. But that's the kind of reality we've created. And I think it's really sad that we've glamorized stress essentially to be an essential for success.
It's an interesting thing because it's marketed a lot in movies and in shows, and I think it was Michael Moore's documentary, I think, where he was going to different places and different segments of society and work, and I think it was him who he went to Italy and he got into the idea of the Spanish siesta. But how even in Italy, like I think he was in Ferrari or one of these top brands, and how it was so customary to go take a break in the middle of the day, have lunch with your family and come back. And it was so foreign to an American audience because, you know, in America it's overtime and you doing double jobs and triple jobs just to have a normal life, and nothing normal about it. But what I was thinking is, if that's the marketed approach, right, or the view of success, but then did Italy and Spain figure out something that we are so misled about, that no, if you tell people work from home a bit more, one day you can be half here, half, is it smart? Or because some people are it's stupid to let them work from home, it's stupid to, and some people are like, no, believe me, productivity will be more. And that's what probably the Italians figured, or to enjoy life a bit more, and then I'll get a better return, and they won't leave me, they won't quit. So what's the balance there?
I think it really depends on what your objective is. So understand that we live the post-American empire days. We live in a capitalist, an entirely capitalist world, right? And capitalism in its plain approach is, if you assume all else is constant, is an arbitrage between how much you pay for people and how much you make on the product. Okay? Because everything else, like even if you think about the raw materials that you use to build the product, it is the result of labor. So if you need some iron or iron to make steel or whatever, the people mining it is really your cost, right? And so that arbitrage between how much do I pay my people and how much output do I get is finally the profitability of the capitalist, right? And so the more I can get out of my people, if I can push them, remember that black and white movie of Charlie Chaplin, where they're in a factory and the supervisor is shouting at them to move their hands quicker. If you can move them just a fraction of a second quicker every minute, right? You can count how many more bolts they'll tighten in the day, and that will translate into products that will become profit for the owner of the business, for the capitalist that's running all of that. Now, we've been told, and I have to admit that this was made very clear in my career when I started at Google, that, with the change of generations, people started to feel less and less obliged to kill themselves to pay the capitalist, if you want. And so the answer to that went in one of two ways. One way is to convince people that this is your life's purpose, that we're created to work, okay? Or the other is to make people align with a purpose while they're at work, which is what Google did. Google said, organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And I have to admit to you, I enjoyed making that a reality, because to me that was a worthwhile thing to invest my life in. But generally, most work environments are all about convincing you that this makes you an amazing person. That if you can buy another Ferrari, just one more Ferrari, everything's going to be fine, and now finally you've made it. Now finally your life is worthwhile, right? And so we all chase that dream, and we chase that dream forgetting that there are things that are way more important than that dream, right? That, by the way, if you are successful enough to buy a Ferrari, wonderful, okay? I'm not a big fan, but if we can argue that. But the reality is, if you do that but never see your kids, or if you do that but die of a heart attack when you're in your early 50s, or if you do that and not work out and start to lose your health or whatever, then by definition you're investing yourself in the wrong side of the equation, not for your own benefit but for the benefit of those who manipulated you. And how do they manipulate you? They basically focus on productivity, and as a result, you read it in every Harvard Business Review, you read it in every, business magazine or business training, and there's always this guy with the striped suit on the cover of Times magazine saying, people are the most productive when they're stressed. I don't believe that. I believe people are the most productive when they work in good teams. I believe people are more productive if they're innovative and creative when they are actually calm and chilled. I believe people are more productive when they are happier, so they're more engaged, so they contribute their best ideas. And I definitely believe that people are more productive when they don't freaking hate their bosses, right? And you absolutely know that for a fact. So don't believe the lie. Don't wear that badge of honor. If you want to be smart and really appear as someone who knows his stuff or her stuff, tell them openly, no, I'm not busy. And I used to do that all the time in my career. I used to say, I'm not busy because I'm intelligent. I can get my job done in 40% of the time, right? And then I invest 40% more to maximize the return, and I don't have to be that busy. If I'm that busy, then by definition I'm doing way too many things that I shouldn't be doing. Okay, it's not just a choice of how you're doing things, it's a choice of which things are you going to do.
Are we naturally designed as human beings to be this stressed, or it's so foreign to our body and mind and nervous system?
Look at her. The answer is right there.
Well, am I stressed?
No, very calm all the time.
If we go as a human history creature, are we even designed for this level of stress?
No, we're not. We are designed for stress, eustress. So EU stress is the good type of stress. And that is the stuff that actually gets us to perform better, but that's over short term. So it's your stress response goes on for a limited period of time. You run from the tiger, you win a race, you get a deadline over a short period of time. And that actually gets you to perform better or survive. But then past that point, it damages you. So then it puts you into the state of what we call chronic stress, which is just simmering. What most people in the modern world are simmering in chronic stress in the background, continually over time without themselves even realizing. And so that build-up has come from being in a world that wasn't designed for the system that we have, partly, but also we don't understand the system that we have and how to use it in the correct way, how to calm it down in the right way, and actually understand the parts of ourselves that require you to really know yourself well to feel calm, because the modern world, whether you want it to or not, is stressing your system, right? Unless you're on a paradise beach island with zero WhatsApp, zero digital devices, sipping a nice tropical drink, you are under stress in your system. So all these micro stresses, a lot of people will say well, I'm not that stressed, nothing that stressful is going on in my life. Even if it's not, your system is constantly being stimulated and bombarded by this, firstly, information overload, but secondary, the sensory ignition of our nervous system purely because of all this that we've designed, but our nervous system isn't made for it. So it's your WhatsApp notifications, multiple emails, getting stuck in traffic, the aggressive factory setting alarm that jolts you out of bed and wakes you up. All those things set your nervous system off just a tiny bit. And then they add up one by one in a little house, micro stresses. And then it's the last thing that someone says that you snap at, because that was quite literally the straw that breaks the camel's back. And then everyone's like, well, I'm not that stressed. Why am I screaming about, the big no milk in the fridge? And that's just the final micro stress. And so we're not designed for this world in the way that our nervous system isn't. But equally, I think that if we actually understood our systems better, we would be able to cope with it much more effectively.
I think the 90 seconds rule is also very important to explain there.
So from when we get stressed in our system, there's studies showing, Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor, who Mo knows is an incredible neuroanatomist, she actually shows that from the second that you have your stress reaction, it takes 90 seconds for that chemical reaction to clear out of your body. And then the reignition of it is actually your conscious choice in your mind. So really, it's 50% of our own stress is internally generated by how we think, essentially, because, in our work, we look at the external, right? You have external stresses, but then you also have internal, and that's all our own choice, because that's what the thoughts we're creating about what's going on around us.
So just to understand this, so let's say we're having a meal and you broke the glass fell. So the moment it fell, and let's say it's an expensive glass, right? And now the first, that's the 90 seconds that now I'm stressed automatically but then you mean within the 90 seconds, I'm making a decision according to my perception?
After the 90 seconds. So within 90 seconds, after 90 seconds, it's no longer a chemical reaction. The hormones in your body are flushed out.
Okay. So now you decide to linger or not.
Yeah, so now your prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, engages to verify if there is a reason to fight or flight or not. Okay? And because our stressors are no longer a tiger, okay, most of the time, if your stressor is an email, or your stressor is, you know, oh, this is a very valuable glass, or your stressor is, you know, I can't continue to have a relationship with my partner, or whatever, those stressors are unlike the reason why stress was created in the first place. Stress was because of a life-threatening event, okay? And so when your prefrontal cortex engages, when your rational brain engages, it basically looks at the situation and says, yeah, the email is still there, and triggers another 90 seconds lease, okay? And so it's every 90 seconds that you look back, consciously or unconsciously, at the event and say, still a threat, I'm gonna renew it. And think about it, because some people are stressed for 90 minutes, 90 hours, or 90 days, okay? I remember vividly, I told you that story, when I was teaching Solve for Happy early on, I had a woman come after the first hour of the training, and really angry at me. She was like, what are you talking about? How can you say that happiness is a choice? You have no idea what happened to me when I was 16. She was 78 at the time. 62 years. 62 years of renewing the lease, okay? And so I cried. I looked at her, and she was a small, lovely, and really you can see she was battered by life. So I smiled and I hugged her, and I said, did it work? And she said, what do you mean? I said, holding on to something that happened when you were 16, did it work? And she burst crying, right? The whole idea is that we somehow in that grinder of life never stop to say, is this really worth my stress? And the most important question is, does breaking the TV fix it? Right? So, you know, I came late, and I apologize publicly in front of everyone.
أول مرة.
Yeah, but I was stuck in traffic to the point that I had to park on the side and walk, right? But going through all of that, I can tell myself, Alice is here, you know, she's British, she was always on time. And you know, I love you and I don't want to disrespect you, and you know, everyone's here and getting ready, and you know, it's such a waste of their time and effort. And I can get stuck into those thoughts, right? Or I can simply tell myself, well, you're late. Text Anas, tell him openly that you're late, there is no disrespect, so that everyone knows, and try the best that you can to get there, right? That's a choice that basically says, cortisol, not needed, okay? What you need is to walk as fast as you can to try and make it work. But by the way, all of the stress is not gonna help. It's a choice.
And you think that's the golden moment is within the 90 seconds or right after it?
Right after, yeah.
You're thinking, not worth my time.
Yeah.
Email archive or email reply now. Like, but it's interesting what you said, this renewal of the lease. يعني an unread message, a pending proposal, whatever, like these things, they might sound small, but if I put 60 of them or 15 or 30, I look at my to-do list, and this is why sometimes I really don't like WhatsApp, because I'm very good at managing it, but I think at some point we will have an AI managing it for sure, because you look at, like now, after this interview, all of our WhatsApps will probably have, I'd say, 15 to 30 minimum new messages.
Yeah, new conversations, not new
and
messages.
You need to know, and you need to know entertain them when? On the toilet seat or before you sleep? Like, sometimes the toilet seat is the best time to catch up with everything.
It's stressful, man. And I don't want to know that you answer my messages.
Honestly,
actually, I don't
when
want
you
that
said you're
image in my
late,
head,
when you said you're late, I'm like, okay. But I'm just thinking of this small 1% piling up together, and then you're really anxious in the day. You're on edge because so many things are pending your response.
So that's one form, one source. Actually, you're much better than I at explaining this. So this is one of 4 quadrants where stress comes from. Right?
Where's the question on that? I have one question on, I have the 3 L's, I have the 4 dimensions of stress, and I have ton.
A ton.
So we'll get to all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Why did you join forces?
Why?
Why? Oh, why?
Because I am a very lucky old man. Yeah.
I think because COVID luckily made you not travel, so you were forced to speak to me on Zoom, which was great.
That was part of it, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because when you kindly came on my podcast at Zoom, and then in COVID, and then I went on yours, and we became good friends. I think from hearing, I knew Mo's story, and then from hearing my story, and we kind of just really realized that we both had a huge want to kind of, always happiness for him, right? But I lost my own dad to stress. And so I really I was doing this work, but I wanted to keep doing it in an impactful way. And I kind of convinced you that you can't really be happy if you're stressed, right?
So 1 billion happy is a flop.
And 1 billion happy is a flop, unless people aren't stressed. And so, and the world is the most stressed it's ever been right now.
Correct.
Like,
and COVID was about to make it even more stressful at the time.
Yeah, and it's only gone on an even bigger trajectory of it. And so I think, nicely with our kind of, like Mo said before, we always look at stuff from a different perspective. We're totally yin and yang. You know, it's like every single thing is, when he said he wanted to do an equation in the book, I was like, oh my God, we kind of have an equation. You're the only person in the world who can actually get me to understand and enjoy physics.
There you
which
go.
I hated at
there
school.
You go. That's a good statement.
And I
That's why the AI episode did so well, because you took a complex topic and you have the skill to simplify it.
Anything you turn into algorithms becomes very simple to explain. So
to you.
Not always. No.
All right. So I have to tell you, I made a career, honestly, on hiring people on talent, not on CV, right? I mean, Alice had 2 CVs at the time. One was the CV of all of the work that she was doing, helping people, senior executives that were in stress. But Alice truly and honestly went to stress school in a way that most people have never. You couldn't imagine when, her 20s, her entire 20s, she lost her, first her sister was diagnosed with cancer, recovered, then she lost her. At around the exact same age that her dad had lost his twin sister to cancer years before. Right after the loss, her dad was diagnosed with cancer. But that was after a couple of years of a business issue in the 2008 challenges, of the economic challenges that basically made their financial situation not as easy. They had to sell their home. Her father was going to court against his partners for something he didn't do, and eventually was proven, innocent around and so on. Then, lost her romantic relationship, lost her job because her company relocated out of the UK, and so many things all at the same time in her 20s. And honestly, when I met you, you were in your late 20s, early 30s.
I just turned 30.
Turned 30, and she was zen as a Yoda. It was really unbelievable. And this is what I did my whole life, is I learned to find the super talented people at what they do. And I have to admit to you, this is, until today, it is my favorite book. I mean, Solve for Happy has part of my soul in it because of Ali. But this is such a good book because I am the grumpy engineer who looks at everything, in a very logical, process-oriented way, right? Alice is just, I don't know what to call you. I mean, femininity itself, her approach is very soft, it's very nurturing, it's almost the opposite. None of what Alice would, had written in the book, I would ever write. Or even approve of writing. Like sometimes in the book, we object to each other. It's like, by the way, I don't believe in any of that, right? And she does that on my work and I do that on hers. But it gives a very comprehensive view. And I think once I noticed that, even more than Alice, I wanted this book to happen because it really is a yin and yang approach to something that's very, very important.
Okay. You mentioned, Alice, you touched on if stress, a certain level of stress can be healthy. So not all stress is bad, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
But sometimes sporadic ones, it's healthy for focus or, I don't know, speed or survival, I guess. So we can say that some stress is healthy because there is this clip, I was being interviewed and they asked me about fear, and I said something along the lines that I do believe a pinch of fear is healthy. Too much fear paralyzes.
Yeah.
Pinch of fear keeps you in it, just like if you don't wear the seatbelt because you're not afraid, you get in an accident and you screw up. But if you're afraid of falling off an edge or you're afraid for your child, a bit is healthy, I think. So I don't know if the same can fall onto the stress aspect.
Yeah, definitely. It's like a little bit of stress is good for you. It's like it really we need a little bit of stress, right, to exactly perform and motivate ourselves even, and to be safe. You know, if a car's coming to hit you in the road, you need some stress to get out of the way or be flattened. And so yeah, that well, it's flattened.
Very cartoonish.
In my head it is. It's not dramatic. But it is like a little bit of stress is good for you. We need that. But no one has a little bit these days because of how they create their own stress as well as what the world's giving them.
So on that point, which I hope you get to, so that little bit is not a problem. What the problem is when we let stress break us. So we need to talk at a point in time
But we can go there now. Like how? The next one was going to be the question is how do you differentiate between good stress and bad stress? Because if it's bad or accumulative, you don't want to reach that point that you said the straw that broke the camel's back, I think, right?
Yeah.
So don't talk about camels.
Yeah, we've been talking about camels a lot today. So I think sometimes stress is such a silent killer.
Oh yeah, that's
and
one of them.
It's very difficult to be aware of it. It's like you said, when you ask people like, yeah, I'm busy, I'm good, I'm happy, I'm productive, and you're really in a delusion, like you really don't feel it. Until I remember, I think a year or two ago, I was going through a stressful year, and even sometimes while I'm doing the interview, I could feel my eye twitch.
Yeah.
And then when I researched, it's a sign of stress. I'm like, oh shit, am I actually, because it seems I'm fine, seems. But my point is that's what I think stress is. Because I was like meditating, I was still trying to do the things that help, but I had a stressful year. So that's my question now, maybe it's the similar topic. How do you know the difference between healthy and unhealthy, and before it gets to what you said, the breaking point?
Before you break, I'll go ahead. You start.
No, you talk about how you break, because I think you can answer that in how you actually understand which part of you is getting stressed. You'll actually understand the symptoms and then realize when you're stressed.
So stress is good for you as long as it's within context. Okay, within context. So if I tell you that, zinc as a supplement is good for you, right? Because it helps with the absorption of other vitamins, if you want, creation of hormones and so on. If you have a lot of zinc as a method to kill yourself, it might actually work, right? Because zinc in large quantities is also poisonous, right? So within context, stress is good for you, and context means there is an actual reason to stress, and the duration is very small. Right? So if you have a presentation on Thursday, and this really matters, okay? And you sit down and you focus on it, and a little bit of stress makes you reconfigure yourself, focus, pay attention, put in the hours, great, okay? If you have a presentation every Thursday or every day, and it's just constantly happening and you're constantly stressed, what actually happens is eventually you kill yourself, right? And I really think you should probably cover some of the problems that happen, like health-wise. You will literally eat your internal organs alive, okay? Now, out of context, stress breaks us in 3 ways, right? One of them is trauma. Trauma is, we said stress is the challenges applied to you divided by your cross section, your abilities. Trauma is a very high intensity challenge that is applied to you in such a sharp manner in such a short period of time that it immediately exceeds your ability to deal with it, and you break. It's a bit like, holding a board of wood. If you try to push it, it doesn't break, but if you hit it, it does. That's trauma, right? Good news and bad news. Bad news is trauma will break you every time, okay? when it happens, it will break you. There's almost nobody, none of us is able to deal with it, okay? I lost my wonderful mom last year, in a way that I was not, I mean, my mom was in her 80s, but we didn't expect it at all. She was very healthy, and within 2 months, she left, right? And you know me, I know my story, loss is not a stranger to me. But oh my God, it broke me. It completely broke me. Like, I just couldn't deal with it. I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't understand it. Even though, you expect your old mom will leave one day, right? And the whole pressure of having to be there holding her hand when she was going through what she was going through breaks anyone, right? So every time, bad news is, every time you go through a trauma, loss of a loved one, a difficult breakup, loss of your income or your job, being in war, of course, is the biggest traumatic event we have in the region recently. Working in an intensive care unit and witnessing the suffering of others, being in an accident and so on. Every time you are likely to break. That's number one. Number two, which is bad news, is that 91% of all of us will get at least one PTSD inducing, that's the highest level of traumatic event at least once in your life. You'll get at least one in your life. This is similar to being stuck in the Twin Towers when 9/11 hit. Basically that level of trauma. Of course, it's different between one person and the other. One person needs to be in a very, very traumatic event to break, and others may break and consider the biggest trauma of their life the end of a love story, right? By the way, no judgment. It's just the question of the cross-section of each of us. Now, the good news is, of those 91%, so I'm hoping when I tell people that, I'm hoping that you will be the 1 out of 10 that doesn't get that event, but it's likely that each of us is going to be one of the 9, right? The good news is, believe it or not, of the 90% that gets one traumatic event that breaks them, 93% of them will recover within 3 months, completely recover as if nothing happened, okay? As a matter of fact, they'll recover and be stronger through what is known as post-traumatic growth, right? 96.7%, these are statistics from 9/11, by the way. So people who were victims in that area during the Twin Towers collapse, right? 96.7% will recover in 6 months. All of them will enjoy post-traumatic growth. So believe it or not, trauma, even though it's one of the reasons we break, is not the reason for the stress pandemic of the world, right? The other 2 reasons are actually quite interesting. One is burnout, okay? And the other is what I call an anticipation of threat, right? Alice, maybe you cover burnout and I cover the anticipation.
Carry on with the anticipation then.
No, burnout for you.
Okay. Well, I mean, burnout is now actually, it's a huge problem today, and it's now actually the World Health Organization has classified it as, firstly, recognizing it as an actual, illness now. And it's essentially, that's mostly related to work stress, but it's also related to emotional stress. So we get burnt out when we have quite literally pushed our system to the point of wearing it down so much over time with cortisol, because cortisol is a super drug in terms of a super hormone when it's short term, but when it's long term, it causes a host of inflammation in the body and basically is a breeding ground for disease. And so when we have this, our system is constantly sort of being worn down over and over in the background from all these added things that you were talking about earlier. It's just that one little thing, more. And you keep repetitively doing something. And eventually your body says, I literally can't get out of bed, enough. Whether that's from the amount of physical things you've done or whether it's from the amount of thoughts you've also processed around it and the emotions. And eventually you're completely flattened and your circuit essentially short circuits and it's just like, can't do it. And so burnout really, it's not, the strange part is though that a lot of people are getting to burnout, but that's not, for me, I don't think of that as the problem, right? It's the reality of the lack of awareness of when you're getting there and what's happening in that in-between space, because if we really understood ourselves well then, we would never get to it. But like we talked, we'll talk about it more, but it's no one really understands their own system and how, their mind, their heart, their body and their soul work, and how all four of them get stressed in different ways.
It's a lot of little things. So burnout is all of the sub-trauma stuff, right? When people reach burnout, they normally, like Alice was saying, they snap at something that's really not worth it. They wake up in the morning and there is no coffee at home or whatever, right? And you would think about it and you'd say, that shouldn't really get me there. But somehow it's that one last thing, right? Now, the trick around burnout is, I apologize, mathematically, it's the sum of all of the stressors multiplied by their intensity, multiplied by their duration, multiplied by the frequency of their application, right? So if you go through your normal day and commute, for example, is some part of your stressors, right? Are you commuting every day? How intense is your commute? How long is the commute? Okay, and how many times do you do it every day? Right? So you multiply that, and then commute can be something this much or that much. And the problem is, commute on its own is not the reason why you're breaking. It's also the too much sugar that you drink, or maybe that you eat or drink, the annoying messages that you start very early in the morning, and so on and so forth. And so when it comes to burnout, believe it or not, we don't advise people to remove the big bits that are stressing them, but we definitely advise people to remove every bit that they can remove. So one of the exercises that Alice normally teaches is go every Saturday, sit down, write down everything that stresses you, right? And literally look at it with a red pen and say, last week 27 things stressed me. This annoying friend, that alarm in the morning, all of the stuff that I see on Twitter, this and that, right? And literally with a pen say, no more Twitter, okay? Delete it from your phone, one stressor gone, right? Or, commute is stressing you, okay, next week I'm going to leave either early or late, make it a little easier, and so on, right? And it's all about not just removing the stressor, but also reducing the intensity of the stressor. So
any factor in the formula that we can adapt rather 100%. Than completely remove.
Exactly. If you can completely remove it, like if this annoying friend is really annoying you,
block.
or have a conversation with them. Like I've so many times.
I just thought people the most toxic response block rather than communicate.
The amount of people you've told to just say, when people are stressed, you're like, just get rid of that friend. They're so annoying.
But that is absolutely true. And by the way, I honestly have conversations with, not anymore. My friends now are very select, right? But in my younger years, I would go like, can I ask you something? At the end of a very long coffee that stressed the hell out of me, I'd go like, did you notice how negative you were in this, in this entire hour that we spent together? Is there a way that we can enjoy the time we spent together? Because honestly, if it's going to constantly stress me every time, I'm going to feel less inclined to spend more time together.
And technically, nobody will want to spend time with that person eventually.
Yeah, that's not my job, but I can at least tell them openly, look, we need to change this, or otherwise
I can't. And that's a boundary for yourself.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And most people will think that, especially here in the region, right? Your friends are your brothers, right? And so somehow you start to say, oh, but come on, I love this guy. Yeah, but he's stressing the hell out of you. So have the conversation, right?
Mo, a few years ago, many years ago, I read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book.
Great book, yeah.
So there was
it worked.
There was the idea. There was the idea of asset versus liability. So I took the real estate ratio, or what he applied there. So I applied it to people. Yeah. And every person in my life, all of us, if we think of anybody who's kind of irritating us, and if you think, are they more an asset in my life or more a liability, you'll quickly know. Maybe I've known him since childhood, but everything else is a liability. And you're like, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
You know, because he's always in trouble. I always have to take him out of trouble. He's always complaining. He's negative. So you're like, not worth it. It's more tricky when it's the 50-50 or 60-40, but I think it at least gives you perspective.
Correct, 100%.
You know?
Yeah, and I think it always deserves a conversation. Now the thing is, you can make those choices by sitting down on Saturday, writing down everything that stressed you last week. Okay, really. I mean, normally we wouldn't advise that you look at the negative side of your life, but really introspecting and looking and saying, okay, you know what, 60% of those things are within my control. Now, if you start to remove the ones you can and reduce the intensity of the ones you cannot, very quickly you'll move further away from burnout. Right? So you don't have to drop the big project, okay? It's not the big project that's burning you out. It's stressing you, but it's not burning you out. It's the big project and all of the little things piling up on top of it.
You know, one of my favorite sayings last year that I learned was, anything hysterical is historical. So a hysterical response, like I said, the dish falling, and you go like, come on, what? And you go over. It warrants a question. Because technically one plate broke. That's the objective view. Shouting for 10 minutes is not normal for a broken plate. So you have to ask yourself, or maybe let's say somebody is very not expressive. He was just angry inside, hysterically inside. That person should ask themselves, why am I this angry? It's been 2 days and I'm still irritated, for example.
Yeah.
So that's a hysterical response even internally. And you have to ask yourself, it's not maybe the big thing that has made me reach here. It's the accumulation of these stressors in my life that I'm not confronting. And one thing you just said, you said, I don't want people to look at this negatively, that to list down the stress. I don't think it's negative because you're looking at it with the intention to not be a stressed, miserable human. That's nobody likes. That's the intention. I want to be nicer. I want to be more zen. So it's a very noble.
And I want to be objective. I want to be objective. I want to look internally and externally at my life and say, I can improve this.
Yeah. Okay, more stuff. Can stress kill you?
Yes, 100%. I mean, I lost my own dad to stress, and I know that for a fact. You know, he was stressed continually for 5 years from multiple things going wrong, mainly the reality of his eldest daughter, you know, dying of cancer, but that was a 4-year period of illness that was extremely stressful. And at the same time, he lost everything in his life that he'd built. So, you know, his business, he had a lawsuit going on, like Mo said, he had just so much stress, and he was of that generation where you just don't talk about it, you know, you just get on with it. And that was just not an option for him to even admit to us some of the things that were going on until it was later down the line. And he really internalized everything. And when he was then rushed to hospital 4 days after my sister's funeral from a blood clot in his leg because he just hadn't been moving, he was so depressed and he was just lying on his bed in grief. They scanned his body and resolved the clot, but then found that he then had cancer again because he had it when I was 3 and recovered quickly. And he refused to treat it at this point, right? He'd just given up from life, and he was so stressed by everything that was going on with his business, with his, you know, lawsuit, with the enormous amount of grief he was dealing with, and with us having to sell our home and him move. And he was just like, okay, I've had enough, I'm not treating this. And so I fought with him for a while, understandably on that, for probably, you know, a year. And I was like, you know, you have to see doctors. Like, what's this doctor said? You know, I was that annoying person on the phone every time we spoke. And he was like, oh, you know, later, kept pushing it away. His theory at the time, which ended up being completely correct, was just like, you know, I don't want to spend the last decade of my life in hospital. And equally, I think I'm at an age where this won't grow quick enough to be what kills me. And he actually was right. So what happened was he was rushed to hospital, nothing to do with cancer. He had a burst stomach ulcer that accumulated from severe stress over this 4-year period, burst and caused internal complications. And then 3 weeks later in hospital, after coming home for 1 night for palliative care, he was gone. And during that time in hospital, he had one of those moments, you know, when you die and come back, and he was rushed in intensive care. And the doctors then said to us, you know, has he been under any stress? Because we found finally the hospital was negligent and they didn't find the reason why he originally came in, and they started looking at other things. It's a problem in the UK these days, but they said to us, you know, has he been under any stress? Because this is a huge stomach ulcer, and he must have been firstly in a lot of pain, but also, you know, this is crazy. And we were like, well, yeah, he's been under an extreme amount of stress. And it wasn't just, you know, stress, the physical stress that killed him. It was the emotional stress. You know, I always say, like, to, you know, I say to you, right, I lost my sister once, but I lost my dad twice, because I emotionally lost him, and he became a ghost for 4-5 years before we physically lost him. And that's why, you know, people say, like, okay, can stress kill? It can 100% kill, whether it's from, you know, burst stomach ulcer, whether it's from a heart attack, whether it's from type 2 diabetes, or even now, studies even show that if you have long-term stress, you can actually turn on cancer-expressive genes. And so it 100% can kill, but it's also, what does it actually kill in you whilst you're still alive? You know, it's like the amount of time we waste not living a happy life. My dad was the most charismatic, incredible human I ever knew growing up, like truly was. I'm so blessed to have him as a dad. But when stress took hold of him, he was a ghost. And so he couldn't even be present in a conversation. You could just see him in his mind thinking about all the things he was stressed about. And he actually ended up turning to alcohol, sadly, like later in my life. And that was his solace, because he just wanted to numb his pain and numb his stress. And I just think any individual and any family, when you have that experience, or you are stressed yourself, the ripple effect that has around you. You know, we always talk about this. It's not even the individual. It's that what that individual can ripple to create even more stress. And you have this ability, right, as a human. You are that raindrop, essentially. If a raindrop drops in a pool of water, it ripples. And you decide whether that ripple is one of stress, or, you know, anger, or negativity, or whether it's one of calm. And stress, we actually know, is actually contagious as well. You know, studies have shown that if you are around someone for, whether it's your team all day, or whether it's your family, and you're stressed, cortisol will seep through my skin and will activate the reaction in you to set your stress response off, even without touching. So we know, and everyone has that feeling, right? You all know that feeling when someone's stress comes into a room and everyone's like, okay, that's a bit stressful, and everyone feels a bit on edge. And so it's really about, like, looking at, you know, yeah, stress is the killer, and people think that's traumatic, but it really is a killer of, you know, your happiness as much as your health.
It's probably the biggest killer in today's world, isn't it?
Yeah.
What,
I mean, of non-emergency doctors related visits, 70 to 90% of all non-emergency doctors visits are somehow related to stress now, which is crazy.
Which I think, Anas, that there is an very interesting message in this, in that even if you don't care about yourself, right? Anyone who has a duty to people that they love need to work on their stress. So if you combine both those three messages: 1, stress kills; 2, stress is contagious; and 3, as we said at the beginning, stress is a choice, right? You can, you know, it's not the events of your life that stress you; it's the way you deal with them that does, right? So basically, like anything that's health related, if you're responsible enough, if I told you that smoking kills you and you make the choice that you want to die because you love smoking, that's one thing. But if I told you that smoking can kill your kids because of SIDS or secondhand smoke at home, maybe you should think twice, at least about smoking at home, right? And that's, I think, the message we're trying to send to the world. You know, the mission is 1 million people out of stress every year. And the message is, it's not normal to be that. And it's not good for you, and it's not good for your family, and it's not good for your productivity, it's not good for your success. And it's manageable. So why are you doing this?
It's not only bad, saying you're stressed and you're busy, even I'm guilty of it, is attractive. It's a cool thing.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
like we're proud. Hey,
Yeah.
how you been? So busy, my God. Like it's
a brand.
It's a thing. So it's the capitalist world has marketed that if you're slow, you're a loser. If you're not doing 16 things a day, you're not great, you're not successful. So it's not only bad, but it's like when cigarettes were really cool and nobody really knew how bad it was. So everybody wanted to smoke to look cool. So it's something that kills you, but do it because you look really cool doing it. And you're like, yeah, I'm killing myself. So now it's stress. It's like a masked poison.
I met when I was at Google X. So I was Chief Business Officer of Google X, very successful if you want. And I met one of the Fortune 500 CEOs, came to X. We spent an hour, we chatted about things, amazing meeting. And it was going so well, he said, "Are you free? Can we spend another hour?" I was like, "Yeah, I can free up my time, but I didn't expect that you'll have another hour." He said, "Why? I work 4 hours a day." And I was like, "What? You're heading one of the top 500 companies in the world?" And he said, "Yeah, I work 4 hours a day." And I said, "How?" And he said, "Well, any meeting that's less than an hour is not worth my time. So everything that my team used to try and pull me in, that was basically operational, I say no, okay? If there are more than 4 things that deserve an hour a day, then the company is not running well. So I limit myself to solve your problems, consolidate your thinking. I'm willing to look at 4 complex issues a day, right? And then the rest of the day, the other 4 hours, or if I stay more or less, it doesn't matter." He said, "I walk around, I hug people, okay, and I chat. And I learn so much from it, and I love it, and my people love me, and I love most of them, and most of them. And basically, he was saying, my badge of honor is that I'm the CEO of one of the top companies in the world because I'm doing it right, because I respect people. And by the way, that doesn't only involve the CEO, right? So if we took the CEO as the extreme example. Take the most junior person, okay? And the most junior person attends on average, 6 meetings a day? Okay, sends on average 20 emails a day or 10 emails a day? What? Why? Because they are sending a heartbeat, saying, "See me, I'm here, I'm available, I'm busy, I'm productive, I'm engaged in everything, promote me and love me." Right? I don't think that's what gets people, it does get people promoted, but not in the long term, right? What gets you promoted in the long term is you deliver. And what gets you to deliver is to decide what matters, focus on it, and get it done. And again, one of my stories is when I was in my mid-30s. I know my friend will laugh about that because I said that before and he knew I was talking about him. One of my dearest friends was actually, he's the funniest, loveliest, kindest heart on the planet, wonderful guy. We worked as peers in a company, and my boss just loved him. Like, he's really lovable, okay? And so he would go out with the boss after work, and they would have fun and laugh and go to, events together, and, he's lovable. I'm grumpy like, you cursed, I'm grumpy like fuck. I put my head down and I work my backside off. Anyway.
حلو انك قلت fuck بس ما قلت ass.
Right? So anyway, I go to my ex-wife, wonderful woman, very wise, Nibel. And I say, "Nibel, from now on, I think I'm going to be late after work. I'll just take my boss out and, it's important for my career." So she looks at me with a lovely, lovely smile, with love. And she says, "You're going to suck at it." Okay? I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, look, if you're comparing to this other guy, he's a natural, he's a wonderful human being that loves to have fun and laugh and party and so on. You're not. Your boss does not want to talk about algorithms and statistics after 6 p.m. I advise you continue to put your head down and grow the business."
Nice.
And that's what I did, right? I didn't waste my time on customer meetings that wanted to party and, wine and dine. Yeah, some salespeople are very good at that. That's not me. Okay, I didn't waste my time on, 16 deals a day when 2 deals would make my quota for the year, right? There is a lot that happens. How many, email groups are you subscribed to? How many meetings do you attend that you don't need to attend? How many heartbeat emails do you send just to say that you're alive? And then you get 20 responses back, which means you have to respond 20 times more, right? How many times do you, volunteer or be brought into a project that you have no expertise in whatsoever, but you're killing yourself because you think doing more is going to make you, get better at work. Doing better is going to get you better at work. And the only way to do better is to do less, but do it really well.
But Alice and Mo, like I'm listening, and one of the things that crossed my mind was, where is the line between not being so packed and busy equals complacency and not achieving anymore and being delayed, rather than over packing your schedule, overdoing things, and then there's burnout, and there's I'm not enjoying this, and my like if we relate even here, the trailer is not the best trailer, or the video is not edited well. So where is that line where you're so lenient that everybody, but then I know you'll send Anas, it's the hiring, you have to hire accountable people. So I want to think
I
with
love
you.
your people. I'll say that openly.
So help me with this, like everybody listening, and I'm thinking also business owners or heads of department or managers or anybody, even a person with a household and kids. Where is that line of I need them not to feel continuously stressed and still giving us a nice delivery versus I'm stressing everybody out, you know?
I think there's two sides to this question, right? And I know what you're going to talk about, so I'll let you talk about that. But I think when you look at your own individual like schedule, right? If you don't have a single space in that day, then you've got a problem. And a lot of people will literally know every single second, and it's not in the sense of, okay, it's like meeting, doing that, going there, everything out in the evening, every single thing is full. If you don't have at least half an hour in your day that is totally for you, you're doing something wrong for your system. And everyone will say, okay, well, I don't have half an hour. You do, even if you have 15 minutes there, 10 minutes there, 5 minutes later. It's like you have to give your system the space it needs to come back into calm. And that can even be done as well, like in 5 minutes throughout the day. I have like clients who'll put like labeled, calendar reminders in their calendars saying like breathe 5 times a day, because today in the modern world, there's even something called email apnea, which is when we quite literally are sat at our desks and don't take a breath and breathe when you're writing an email. And so many people are like, oh my God, that's me. You're so stressed. You're like, there's actually a term, it's email apnea is what that's called. And when you're not breathing properly and extending an exhale even just once a day, that tells your body to go into fight and flight without you realizing. And so we do all these little things that our body is actually physiologically telling you to be stressed from what we're putting into it and what we're actually telling it to do. So it's if you can look at your schedule and be like, okay, well, I don't even have a tiny bit of space for myself in this day. You need to take something out of it, or you need to delay something and push it to later in the week. And we always tell ourselves when we're stressed, right, that every single thing is a priority. That's impossible. Not every single thing can be a priority, otherwise it wouldn't be a priority. You have to decide and get really conscious about that. I always look at this with overwhelm with people. It's saying like if you have 3 lists of your working lists, it's like what is urgent priority, what is upcoming, and then what is ongoing, just like that should be simmering in the background. And you can always chop and change that. And I think when you get really, really honest with ourselves, okay, what is actually a priority this week? Is it you being bad with your boundaries and not doing the things, for example, so often we actually just say yes to stuff. And, but a strong no is better than a weak yes, right? And it's like saying, okay, no, I can't do that this week. Sorry, I don't have time to have dinner with you this week, this friend, even though they really wanted to see you. Can we do it next week? Because I've realized that actually I need that time for myself this week. You don't even have to tell them that, but internally you need to make that decision. And it's the same with, with work things. Like, what is the priority today? And what is the priority tomorrow? And how and where am I going to actually put in the priorities for myself as well? Like my own emotional wellness, my own mental wellness as well. And seeing the difference for what that actually creates in you. Everyone knows that if you are at your desk all day and you don't take a break, good ideas are not coming, right? If you take a 5-minute walk and come back to your desk even, something better will come. And you have to even, for creativity, I really truly don't believe that ongoing stress and creativity can coincide. That you don't get into flow and have all those innovative ideas and creative ideas when we're under stress and just going through the motions to just fill up our space, right? You have to give yourself space for that to come through. So I think on the individual level, like every single person should look at their calendar, their schedule daily, actually the night before, because that's less stressful, right?
I do that, yeah.
You know, you don't want to be starting the morning being like, what do I need to cut out, and having yourself in a panic, right? It's that night before, okay, well, what do I need to do to change for tomorrow? So then when you go into that next day, you really know what you're doing and what space you have, and using that space in a really mindful way that's doing something that really benefits you, you know, and actually when you understand yourself, right, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but like when you really understand what part of you needs your attention, like mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, you can actually designate that time to that day and get a real result and a real change within yourself, and everything will change productive wise as well.
Do you want to add on this?
Oh yes,
Yes,
I do.
Go.
So I'll start by saying, when we started Unstressable, we started with the book and the mission. And then we had our Unstressable.com, which is a consumer community. So individuals, anyone on our typical, webinars, there will be anyone from a, hardworking person to, a stay-at-home mother. And, it's the individual. And recently we started Unstressable at Work, right? Which basically is an attempt to help organizations create an unstressable environment. Unstressable is not stress-free. It has stressors, but it's unstressable, right? And you'll be amazed how much of Unstressable at Work is leadership coaching. And I know this sounds really shocking to some people, okay? But a good leader achieves what they set out to achieve, okay? So if you want to define success is not to maximize something, okay? Success is to achieve what you set out to achieve. If you tell yourself, next year I'm going to grow by 9%, right? Growing by 20 is not good for the business. Understand that, okay? If growing by 20 was good for the business, that should have been your target at the beginning of the year. The idea of maximize is not right, okay? And so there are a few interesting things that a leader needs to learn, okay? And every one of us, when we say كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته, each and every one of us is a leader in their own little scope. The first thing you need to learn is how to set your targets. Because if you set the wrong targets, or you set stretchable targets, or you set maximum, like I'm going to push my people till the end, okay? You're going to achieve the growth target, but you're not going to achieve the retention target, right? That's number one. So we need to teach leaders to understand what's a good target. Is growing 9% this year and 9% next year better, or is growing 12% this year and declining next year is better, right? Number one. Number two is, what is enough? So one of the most interesting conversations I always had with my teams, and you can always ask my teams were very, very senior, either regional sales, VPs or country VPs, right? When I was at my senior level at Google. And they would come to me and go like, look, Mo, we have a pipeline of 27 clients. These are very important. We're going to push hard. We're going to try to finish them, And I would listen. And then I would say, look, I'm interested in those 3, okay? I'm not going to listen to anything you say about the other 24. If you ask me for meetings, I'm not going to go, okay? But you can feel free to do whatever you want. If you want to go, continue to call on them, that's your choice. But if it was me, I would call them and say, we're really unable to provide that kind of attention. There are other channels in the organization that can give that. Please go ahead and deal with them, right? And they would go berserk. Like they would go like, are you mad? And I'm like, no. Those 3, if you do them right, will more than achieve our target. Well, why are you chasing the others, right? And believe it or not, that's because I know what is enough. And enough is to achieve what you set out to achieve, nothing more and nothing less, right? This is very different in leadership. It's very different in individual self-management. I told you, I love restoring classic cars. If you let me, I'll restore 1 a week, right? But that's not wise. Wisdom is, when I get into a project, I'll put my whole life in it, I'll make it perfect, I'll enjoy it, I'll achieve what I set out to achieve. Number 3 is the dimensions of what you assign to yourself, okay? And believe it or not, most of the leadership that we work with, Alice does this more than I do, is all about the idea of, great, now that we've figured out your growth target, your leadership target, your whatever, strategy targets and so on, can we talk about your team targets, okay? How do you want them to feel? How long do you want them to operate? Do you want them to speak well about you? And I'll tell you openly, the reason why I succeeded in my career is because of one thing and one thing only. I've always made my spot in the company I worked with the happiest part of the company. So I work at Google that hired the best people in the world, and the best of them would want to come to work for me because I'm the happiest place out there. Google will pay them the same, whether they're in this department or that department. I respect them, I don't pressure them, I give them full autonomy to go and operate as long as they achieve their targets, so they're happier with me. Now, if I get the best of the best and they're happy, I'm likely going to succeed more. So this is what matters, is a very important part of leadership. Also what matters, of course, because of my personal story, was another $1 billion deal more important or another 2 days with Ali more important, okay? And I think most of us, when we're running in the hamster wheel, we forget, right? And I think when we explain this to leaders, it hits them, okay? That, believe it or not, the only asset you come to this world with is heartbeats. It's the number of times your heart will beat before you die, right? 4 billion, I think, for the average human. And it may appear to be a large number, but every day that passes, 60 beats per minute or 70 beats per minute, right? By 60 minutes, by 24 hours, you're losing thousands and thousands of heartbeats. Now, what we do is a very interesting trade, okay? We trade heartbeats for friends. So I'd give Anas 2,000 of my heartbeats, we have a coffee, we have a wonderful conversation, okay? We trade it for money. We trade it for status on LinkedIn. Your choice. If I put you on a game of Monopoly and say, here are your resources, okay, you choose what you're gonna dedicate your heartbeats to. And what most of us, I had one amazing boss at a point in time who was a very difficult person, but probably the best boss I ever had, who entirely did not compromise. He was so focused and relentless. And he basically, one day I was asking him, don't you care about your people? And he said, what do you mean? Do you think I don't care about you? And I said, no, you really care about me, but why is it that every time I talk to you about that person, you turn your back to me? And he said, because first I determine who my people are. So if someone qualifies to be my people, I will care about them, okay? If someone, is your son or your loved one or your, mother, or right, and you're not giving them priority because every time life stresses you, you work harder, you're wasting heartbeats. And those heartbeats, believe it or not, are time-stamped. They're time-stamped. I do not, even though I still have heartbeats, I do not have heartbeats to dedicate to my mother anymore. Do you understand that? And so many of us are completely blinded. Completely blinded. We're running and running and running. Wasting our life, wasting our heartbeats. When in reality, and by the way, some of those heartbeats, you're gonna, if you overstress yourself, you're gonna dedicate to burnout or to staying in the hospital or to treating your diabetes. Or why are we doing this? When is enough? The success is to achieve what you set out to achieve. It's not open-ended. Okay? And if people start to get this and start to understand that you're trading something really valuable, your only limited resource in life, for something that's not. A fancier car or a nicer suit or another contact or a better title. Do you really need those?
I like to play this game sometimes with the audience where I tell them, we talk about time being the most expensive commodity or currency, right? We own as human beings, similar
The
as
only
the heartbeat.
currency. Yeah.
And I tell them, just think about that every second you've spent with me, you're 1 second closer to your death.
Yeah.
And even now. So then you have to ask yourself.
Time well spent.
بالضبط.
Time well spent.
And this is how we have to look at our life. Then you literally, maybe we do what you said. You sit down on a Saturday and you said, how did I spend this week?
Correct.
And was it worth the investment of my finite currency?
Yeah.
Heartbeats or time? I give a bit here. Oh, nice, very nice, very nice. More of that.
Correct.
No. Why did I do that? Why did I entertain somebody that I don't even enjoy having coffee with, for example? Like, what am I doing? Just because they asked, I said yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They asked me 3 times, so I felt shy. You know, it's like
So
we
true.
do that, and because they asked me 3 times, it's not nice. But I think you said something as a strong no, better than
A week yes.
a week.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
It's true. It's like what you're like. You know, if you look at your schedule and you think this was completely draining and this was energizing, if you've got more stuff in there that's draining than energizing, you're going to be depleted at the end of the week, whether you want to be or not. And that's what we kind of have to look at it, like what is sucking from you.
Let's get into. I think I want to talk about because we're right in the middle, I would say. Important
middle is
things. Let's start with the 4 dimensions of stress.
So are we on the ton? Which one are we on? Modalities?
There are 2 fours.
Yeah.
So you're the expert.
I have ton and I have 4 dimensions of stress.
Yeah,
I'm assuming they're not
so-
the same, right?
Yeah. So both are 4. Both are Alice's expertise.
Yalla.
Jump in.
So, so we looked at, when we wanted to look at stress, obviously with models, we always wanted to look at firstly, okay, where's your stress even coming from? Because if you can never change what you're not aware of in any circumstance. So to understand where our stress is coming from is really important to firstly go into all that limiting that we talked about. What can you limit? So our model looked at the external and the internal. So in everything you have macro external, so that's TON is our model, right? TONN. So the macro external is the trauma, and those are the events we talked about earlier that you have no idea when they're going to happen, no control over it. You can't do anything to limit it, but you can be aware of when it's happened and then, work through it and deal with the stress afterwards. Then we have macro internal, which is what we call obsessions. And that is basically, essentially, it's a narrative. It's this one story that you will continually take and go over and over and over, and it becomes like an obsession. And it can be based on a real event that's triggered it, and then you've created your own internal narrative from that event. Or it can quite simply be totally made up from something that you've decided in your own head. Like, I'm not good enough and this is why, and we go on these internal rants. And so the obsession will stress you out because what we know is that it doesn't matter if something's happening inside your own head or in front of you. Your thought can trigger your stress response. So if you're obsessing about something continually, and you'll know it's an obsession versus the noise, which is the the small micro internal. Noise is different to an obsession because it's basically just like that one little niggle. It's like, you're looking in the mirror in the morning and just being like, oh, I look tired today. That's noise. You don't obsess about how tired you look, hopefully, for the rest of the day.
I don't have a mirror.
Huh?
I don't have a mirror.
Oh. Should we get you one? You don't obsess about it all day. But it's just like noise is just littered throughout the day. It's just the human negativity bias because we know as humans we have 80% negativity bias from our brains being hardwired to try to keep us safe. So it's constantly looking for threats. And that negativity bias it brings up today is these tiny little annoying things saying like, oh, you didn't do well in that. Oh, you look fat today, whatever it is. So that's the noise. But the obsession is a really continual stressor and a story that you tell yourself. And then the micro-external is what we call nuisances. And so they are a huge part of what we were talking about earlier that you can limit, right? So the nuisances, one nuisance alone does nothing. So it's not a huge stressor, but it is the aggressive factory setting alarm that jolts you out of bed. It's the WhatsApp notifications, it's the emails, it's the traffic, it's the upsetting news headline that you watch as well, because we know, again, it's like you don't have to be there for the emotional reaction to happen. The same stress response can be triggered. So all these little things are what we call nuisances because they, one alone does nothing, but together they create an army, and that's what can break us, building up over time. And so we talked about something actually I wrote in the book was a morning of ends, which is hilarious because we realized from like talking to people in our research around this was that the average person will wake up in the morning and have had 15 to 18 micro stresses of nuisances and a few noise before they've even left the house in the morning.
Probably left the bed.
Exactly. Yeah, well, literally, that's the thing. It's because you wake up, you turn on your phone, you look at your phone, you have the WhatsApp notifications, you know, it floods in the system. And so if you're getting to that before you even left the house, where do you get to by the end of the day, the end of the week, if you're not doing anything to reduce that, right? And so when you can look at where that stress is coming from in that ton model, then you can first of all look at where it's coming from and what you can limit, and then look at the other side, which is the 4 modalities, which is when you actually understand stress in, we like to call it in a, you know, it's a more sophisticated way essentially, I think, because I think in a nice way, right, stress is this word that gets people's attention. Like we say that, you know, stress is a big topic, but from our work, what we really realized is that stress is not as blanket and as simple as everyone makes it out to be. It's actually slightly complex, and in a nice way, the more you understand that complexity of yourself and stress, the simpler it becomes. So we get stressed mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
But we have a missing N, or do we not?
So no, that was the noise.
So noise was the last one.
Yeah.
Nuisances versus noise.
So it's trauma, obsessions, noise, and nuisances.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about the 4?
Yeah, modalities of
No,
stress.
but hold on, before we go there, I mean, I'd advise people to think about how many of the ton are within your control.
Okay.
Right? So trauma is outside you, it's macro, it's big, it hits all of a sudden. Nobody can control that, right? A lot of the nuisances are within your control.
What about the obsessions?
They're internal, they're coming from within you, right? If you're unable to think them through, do it. If not, go to a therapist to help you go through them. Right? But they're coming from within you. So they're not even things happening outside you, right? Noise is happening within you. It's not even happening from outside you. And if you assume that each of them is 25%, it's not, by the way, right? You know, the internal is probably way more than 50%. And you could say half of the nuisances, maybe another 20% is within your control. You're talking about 75 to 80% of all stressors that are within your control. That's really, really important to understand. If you just stop telling yourself bad things, the noise will stop. Okay? If you just acknowledge that you have obsessions within you, and you simply say, look, I just get this repeated negative thought all the time. I either need to talk to a friend about it, need to talk to myself about it, need to talk to a therapist about it. But if I remove that, that's 25% of my stressors. Right? And I really, really want us to get to that point that so much of it is your choice. Being stuck in traffic and late to you is not my choice. But so much of what happens afterwards inside me and outside me is a choice.
Okay, the modalities.
Yeah, and I think just saying that as well, it's the awareness for people, right? If you aren't aware that you're obsessing, you're never going to change it. If you're not aware that you have 80 micro stresses in your day, you're going to get to burnout eventually. And so when you look at that model and actually get really honest with yourself, particularly about the internal, like Mo said, because we tend to just sort of let that go. And then it can be really blindingly obvious, okay, I've actually got quite a lot of stress that's stressing me at the moment, right? That's triggering me. So maybe I can limit some and then start to actually do something about the others. And that's when the modalities come in. So it's, like I said, it's, you know, stress is this one thing for most people, but it's not. It's 4 parts, because we are all made up of 4 parts of the self. You know, we all have a mind, a heart, a body, and a soul. And all of those 4 parts of us get stressed in different ways. So mental stress is as obvious as it sounds. So it's essentially, it's that thought process. So when we're mentally stressed, we're always ruminating about the past, we're worrying about the future, we are overthinking, we're often obsessing. We found it really hard to focus and be fully present. You know, if you're mentally stressed, you will be having conversations with your loved ones at home or friends, and they'll be like, hello, you're not present, because we are completely in our own world in our head, thinking about everything that we need to do, thinking about how something is stressing us. And, you know, waking up in the middle of the night, even overthinking and not being able to get back to sleep, huge sign of mental stress. Emotional stress is interesting because a lot of people will say, well, I'm not stressed, I'm not emotionally stressed, I'm fine, because they suppress their feelings. So emotional stress will turn up in one of two ways. So it's like you either feel a certain way, so you feel stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, easily irritated, even low in mood, because we know that even depressed, long-term stress can turn into depression. So you can feel those feelings of discomfort, but if you're someone who's like, well, I don't feel that way, I'm not emotionally stressed at all, you'll notice your behavior changes. So when we're emotionally stressed, we try to do everything we can to push away and numb and not face our negative, uncomfortable feeling, because we haven't been taught how to actually deal with them and move them through us quickly. And so our emotional stress will come up in, things like distracting, overworking, overeating, comfort eating, binge watching Netflix, or, if you drink alcohol, then it's, reaching for that glass of wine for that first quick release at the end of the day instead of taking a deep breath. It is equally, getting easily irritated at loved ones. Your memory starts to go. We know when we're actually stressed, that part of our brain is really, compromised. And so you'll find that you're just forgetting things, like walking into a room or forgetting tasks, losing your car keys, and also having trouble sleeping at night. And then physical stress should sound obvious, but we just think that everything to do with physical stress is nothing to do with stress whatsoever. So our physical stress shows up in extreme ways and then in more subtle ways. So the subtle ways are things like that recurring headache you've had for 6 months that's nothing to do with stress, or the stomach digestive issues, whether it's irritable bowel syndrome or digestive issues because
you love Lebanese. No,
because I do love Lebanese, and pickles. But the irritable stomach issues is because in physical stress, when you are under stress for a long period of time, your body will do what it thinks is wise, which would be, okay, well, why do I need to digest a steak if I'm about to become a steak myself from the tiger coming out of the bushes? So it will send blood away from your stomach and things to your muscles. And so digestive issues are a huge, huge common sign of having stress. And then it's things like inflammatory things like, eczema, psoriasis, skin issues, acne, hormonal imbalances, tension in your muscles, just backache, neck ache, shoulders aches, huge signs of stress. And then obviously it gets to more sinister things like elevated blood pressure, higher cholesterol, and then that obviously leads to heart disease, type 2 diabetes that we talked about earlier, and stomach ulcers, or even cancer. And so a lot of these original signs of stress with our physical side, we tend to just ignore for as long as possible until we're actually really needing to go to the doctor, because you've ignored your stomach issues for 10 months, or you've ignored your headache for a year. And it's interesting because the body is far wiser than our mind, right? Our mind will tell us lies all the time. It's always speaking untruths, trying to stress us out, but our body is only telling you the truth. If it's speaking in a signal for you, it's trying to get your attention. And it's also incredibly resilient, right? If you've been under stress for a long period of time, your body will eventually say, ow, but it's not going to do it on day one, because we wouldn't have survived back when the tiger was coming out of the bushes. So if your body's waving at you, it's really time to pay attention in terms of stress. And then the fourth modality, which is obviously one of my favorites, as we know, is something that people don't really ever think of, but equally a lot of people who are super successful will be so spiritually stressed without realizing. And spiritual stress, I define as being totally out of alignment with the truest, most authentic version of yourself. So when you can't even answer the question, who am I, without a label, who am I? I'm a doctor, I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a lawyer, whatever it is.
Podcaster.
Where that's not who you are, that's what you, that's not who you are, it's what you are. It's not what you are, and so it's like saying, okay, well, if I can't answer that, my essence underneath the label of what society has said to me, then we become very spiritually stressed because we're out of alignment with the most authentic version of ourselves. And we also become spiritually stressed when we're disconnected from our intuition and we're not listening to that inner voice. And then we find we either ignore it if we have connected to it. So there's two sides to that intuition side. You're either totally disconnected from your intuition and you're going against what is actually innately right for you from your own soul's messages for your highest good, or you've connected to it and then you just totally disregard what your intuition says, and then later you find you in a very stressful situation because you think, oh my God, I knew that was right for me all along, or I knew I shouldn't have done that, I should have listened to my gut. and I'm now in this situation and it's really stressful. And so, you know, a lot of the time, I think it's interesting because these 4 parts of us, right, the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, when you look at it in this way, okay, what part of me is stressed? And there's always a primary, right? Some people be like, but all of me is stressed, panic. And we say that to people, like we have like a free, you know, quiz on Unstressable where you can actually find out like what your overall score is and what part of you is most stressed.
Unstressable.com/quiz.
Yeah. And so you can then see your score and then see what the primary and the secondary is. And a lot of people will be often surprised at what their primary is. And a lot of the time, you know, it's when you look at these different 4 parts, it's really when you can understand like how your mind's talking to you, when you can understand how to actually soothe your emotions and listen to your heart, understand your body to release stress and actually speak to your soul. When you can do those skills in these different ways that we, you know, teach people, it's then you can use that when you need it, right? When you know in that half an hour that day, okay, I've got half an hour to have some space for myself. What do I actually need today? Have I been sat pushing away an emotion for 2 weeks and really, you know, distracting myself? Do I need to like do some like internal, you know, work on that? Do I need to have a little time with my soul and connect to my intuition and have some silence? You know, what is it that you actually need? And when you know, then you can change it.
I have a side question, but an overall one. Why do any of you bother doing all of this? Like both of you, like why do you actually care? Because if it was money to sell a book, I would say with your level of knowledge, you could be consultants and you have your retainers with top clients. You don't need to sell a book, right?
Not money.
But if it's like, I'm curious because you're spending time with me, you're spending time to write a book. Why do you, because you could apply it only to yourself and maybe your loved ones. And you say, but why do you care that people have to listen to this? And you have the target of the 1 million per year. Like, why do you care? Because you've been through a lot of difficult times. You've been through a lot of difficult times. And you learn these things. And now you can either keep for yourself and my small circle, tools. Or you say, you know what? No, I'll invest more time to help millions. Have you thought of why?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I really want people to understand that life's not meant to be as complicated as we've made it in terms of the stress that we create for ourselves and how stress actually makes us completely disidentify with the truth of who we are. And I don't think that until we come back to that truth as individuals, like on a soul level, on an intuitive level, and, you know, move away from that human side that's actually kind of taking over, which is all that anger in the world, all the stress, all the jealousy, all the hatred. No one's going to have the most authentic and happy experience they're meant to have here. Everything gets complicated. And the reality is, for me, you know, if stress is a killer, which it is, you know, I've seen it in my own family. Like I said before, that killer of your time here, you know, we talked about time being this really precious, you know, commodity, which it is. It's the most precious one we have. And I think living in a state of stress for anyone completely destroys the time that you have here. So I really want everyone, you know, like myself and, you know, Mo, everyone to try and have the best time that they can here. And when I see the difference, right, when I saw my dad and the time that he was having before he let stress take over him, I was like, that's 2 completely different lives and people. And it's not just because of the outside circumstances, it's the person that was around. And I think so many people are living in that without even realizing. You know, it's that feeling of like when you go on holiday and you come back and you're like, oh my God, wow, I feel really calm and happy. If that's the only time that you feel that in your whole existence, what a sad life. Like, what are we doing? You know, it's not working in terms of what I think.
You know, on this, Alice, I remember, I think 2 years ago, I had the 2 seniors who told me something along the lines that, Anas, we want to break, so we want to go, you know, have a good time on vacation. And I told them that's not a good sentence. If you have to go on vacation to feel better, you're going to come back to a shit show and feel depressed again because you're not fixing the infrastructure.
100%.
You should be already at a zen or neutral or joyous and not so joyous, plus minus kind of life already. Like your normal life should be decently nice.
Yeah.
And then a vacation is like extra nice, you know, like 'cause you remove a lot of responsibility. But anybody who wants escapism and is doing it through drugs, alcohol, a vacation, or
100%.
you're coming back to a messed up reality that you're not taking responsibility for to fix.
100%.
Hands down.
I also think you're being honest with yourself about like your level of happiness as well. You know, if that's what you need to be happy, you're not happy, not truly. And I think so much of the modern world today, right, is just layering this on top for fake happiness and putting on a show, essentially, to make ourselves seem happy on the outside when really, like, you're not that happy if that's the only way you can achieve it.
I mean, so that quiz that we do, unstressable.com/quiz, we have 20,000, 21,000 participants so far, right? So part of the work of Unstressable is that whole research around where people are stressed, which part of their modalities.
We'll keep the link so we can push this number up.
Yeah, but the numbers are staggering.
Like scary?
Oh, yeah. The number of people in the red. You know, so you get, are you red, orange, yellow, or green, right? And you get it for every modality. And the number of, I mean, of course there is a bit of, you know, selection bias, because the people that will go and take the survey by definition are worried that they're stressed, right? But the reality of the matter is that everyone around you is stressed. It's just, are they red or orange, right? And it's shocking. And I really think that people react to pain in two different ways, if you ask me. So the level of pain that Alice and I have experienced, some of us go through it and go like, I never want to deal with this again. And some of us go through it and say, I never want anyone to deal with this again, right? This hurts so much that I cannot take it for anyone. And you know, at a certain level of empathy, you start to feel it in everyone. The thing about understanding how it works is that I meet my friends and I know that he's financially stressed, he's going through a different, a difficult relationship time, he is disconnected or she is disconnected from that person, and so on and so forth, right? And I know how it feels because I've experienced many of them. Alice knows how it feels because she's experienced them, right? And there is a point in time where you go, but it's not worth it. And it's solvable, okay? What are you doing? And I have to say, Unstressable specifically, when we first spoke about writing the book, I was like, Alice, I write about happiness, okay? You know, why? And her comment was very clear. People will never find happiness if they're stressed. And, you know, part of my 1 billion happy mission was to address the reasons for unhappiness. And at the time, I had identified love and relationship, the empowerment of the feminine, and AI. And then stress truly is one of the top 4 reasons for unhappiness in the world, right? If you really think about it, you know, I could have continued my life, because you said it's money, I could have continued my life chief business officer of Google X, tens of millions, you know, sometimes every year, and I'd end my life a billionaire, right? 1 billion happy is also a billionaire. It's just that the currency is not dollars, right? And if you really, really, really think about it, if you have the t-shirts that you need, if you have the roof on top of your head, if you have the food that you need, which one do you think you'd be on your deathbed feeling happier about? $1 billion in the bank that you're going to give to your kids? Aya's okay. Aya's okay. Doesn't need $1 billion. Whatever I have is enough for her, right? Or would you be happier if you actually made 2 people happier? Your sister and your best friend, okay? Or 7 people happier, your immediate family, or 20 people happier, your department, okay? And I know for a fact that 60 to 70% of humans would prefer that, okay? Most humans, as a matter of fact, but 60 to 70 who are high on empathy, okay, would prefer to live a life where at the end of that life, they made a difference to someone else, right? Yet, we're running in the hamster wheel, saying, but let me take care of me first. And then when I'm done, I'll take care of the others.
It's like that illusion, I'm doing this for my kids.
Yeah. What a
And
lie.
then you died, and then your kids don't have a father.
And by the way,
they missed out while you were alive.
And even worse, yeah, they didn't have a father when you were alive,
Sorry.
right? And really the question then becomes, in that hamster wheel, are you lying to yourself, or are you lying to them, or are you lying to, who are you lying to? Okay, what actually matters? It's all about that word enough. When do you draw the line and say, my target for this year is this? When do you draw that line?
There's that story, Mo, that I read in, I think it's the book, The Psychology of Money. I don't know if I mentioned this in an interview.
Book.
Yeah, I love it. And it was kind of, Alice, like the synopsis of it is, this multimillionaire is invited to a billionaire's mansion party or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So he goes there. He's already a millionaire. The other guy is a billionaire. So the guy who brings him keeps saying how this guy has more than him. He has this more than you, he has more this than. And he's like, yeah, but I have something he doesn't have.
Yeah.
And he goes, what? He goes, enough.
Enough, I have enough.
And this is the biggest wealth if we can reach. Yeah. I also believe there's a certain level that you really don't need more.
100%.
Everything else is just like.
Yeah, but you know what the bigger trick is? I actually never spoke about that publicly. The bigger trick is, if you want your own individual benefit, you have to fight life for it. If you want the benefit of life, life works with you. I have no idea where the money is pouring in from, Anas. And I don't have many needs. I really don't. Okay? But somehow, as my wonderful, incredibly wise daughter always reminds me, she always tells me, God has paid you in advance. Okay? So don't disappoint him. He paid you in advance. I mean, like, we're cursing today, so we can curse. Like, fuck, I'm born and raised in Egypt, public school, public university in Egypt. Okay? Look at me. You know, Chief Business Officer of Google X, the chance to meet some of the best thinkers in the region, right? I've written 4 books, met amazing people that supported my life. Look at me. Like, seriously. You think this is because I'm smarter than, there was at least 200,000, maybe 250,000 Americans when I was Chief Business Officer of Google X that were more qualified than I. Okay? Something must be in the design of the game. And the design of the game is, if you make a difference to others, the game will help you out. And I really think people need to think about that. You know, it's instinctively within us humans. I always say that. It doesn't matter how smart or hardworking you are. Einstein would have been eaten in the jungle in 2 minutes. It's not intelligence that made humanity survive, right? It's us holding together. This is the part of life that's breaking now. The part of life that's breaking now is that we are no longer acting as a tribe. Each one is so individualized, you know, and siloed, sitting in their own little place looking at crypto. Right? Seriously, why? How much do you need? And if you don't compare to the other guy that just bought a Lamborghini, that's really, really hard on his back, and very noisy and obnoxious, and you know, and really, honestly, not sending the right message, surrounding him with gold diggers, right? If you don't compare yourself to him, why do you need?
What was that study? They did this long study about either it was the happiest people or the people that lived the longest, and the number one. It was a crazy research.
Human connection, the Harvard business, the Harvard review.
Yeah, the number one contributor to, I think, either happiness or longevity
was human connection.
Was human connection with the people that are not in your circle.
Yeah.
So it's like when you walk in and you say hi to like the pizza guy, and you say, hey, what did you do today? And that
my lovely wife
we're
is the
losing
best
that.
in the world.
Random acts of
really?
kindness.
Yeah, she talks to everyone. And everyone, like, when I met my wife, she spoke about John. I don't know if I should, I mean, this is English, so John will know. But anyway, you know, John is almost homeless, 80-something, right? And she told me openly, she said, he's one of the people I love the most in life. And I was like, how did you meet him? And she said, you know, when COVID started, they put us in those little circles, and you would have to call some old person to give them company every day. And she says, in no time I realized that he was helping me, I wasn't helping him. And all of that serendipity of life. Like, I met my wife on a street corner, okay? She was looking at me, so I was like, do we know each other? She was like, yeah, I know your work, and Carly is our common friend. And if you just shut it down and go like, nah, all right, yeah, very nice to meet you, do you want a selfie? And you end up not finding the love of your life. It's how do we choose to live if we were not so important and busy, okay? It's how do you choose to order your coffee if you knew in your heart that the barista is a human exactly like you, and that most of the privilege you have in your life over the barista is mostly luck.
Absolutely.
Mostly who you were born, to, where you were born, the path of your life, the traumas you had when you were a child.
I had this conversation recently. I was talking to a new friend, and she was saying, we got into a philosophical topic by text, which for me is like, that's not the place to communicate. But anyways, it was a good topic. And she said, Anas, we're born to privilege, we're born to safety, we're born to education, we don't choose our family, we don't choose, your religion, the wealth you're born into, and all of these things. And she's like, that automatically should give us the responsibility to look after the people who weren't born with this luck.
Yeah.
We were just lucky. It was not like, oh, my grit and my work ethic got me where I am. Yeah, sure, that's like 1% of the 99 that you are just fortunate to be in this city, in this family, in this whatever.
Anyone in this city, honestly. Like, I always tell people, I came here in 1995, first a couple of years in Abu Dhabi and then in Dubai. All you needed to do is to just honestly do a good day of work. The whole economy was growing so fast. If you worked, if you just was not an idiot, you'd succeed.
You get rewarded.
Yeah, you'd succeed.
I like how philosophical this conversation went, like different places, which I love, by the way.
But I think before we leave it,
yeah.
كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Every one of us is a leader responsible for those around us. Okay? And those choices that we make, if you're in an organization, make that an unstressable organization. It's going to be good for the business, for the bottom line, but it's your duty to the people you're responsible for. If you're a parent at home, okay, make your home unstressable for your family. Okay, it's going to be good for the evening that you want to spend and drink a cup of tea without being bothered, and it's your responsibility to care for them. Okay? And every one of us, just like the father is responsible for the family and his wife, the mother is responsible for the family and her husband. The kids, as they become responsible, should be responsible for their parents. We really have to change that mentality of I'm alone here. I'll just focus on me and everything else will follow. Nothing follows. You get paid in advance when you let life help you.
You know while we're talking about this, it got me thinking, I think it's a valid question. I was thinking, I wonder when I step into the office if they think, what a piece of shit. Or like, oh, that's going to be cool today.
They didn't
or
answer.
Here comes stress.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Like, I know they might not answer me as bluntly, but it's a good thing to, even if you don't know the answer, you can ask to yourself when you get into your office. When
100%.
Do people really like seeing me? And they're like, oh, here comes us, we're going to work on something cool. Or like, oh my God, the stress just came,
Yeah.
And
not out of insecurity, not because I want to be liked, but because it's my responsibility.
Exactly. Like, I would like to be, I always talk about also legacy, right? الإرث. When you leave, a friend of mine lost his father, and he said, and it's not a famous person, and he said, Anas, at the graveyard, the amount of people that came to me
Habibi.
and said how much my father played a role.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that's a billionaire.
Like, wow.
That's a billionaire. You see, so this is exactly what we do. So the reason for at work is exactly that. is people think that we go to their companies to teach and be paid. Yeah, of course, there is a cycle of money and life. You know, you have to do everything as a business because people don't appreciate what they get for free. But sitting with one, and every time we see it, you sit with one CEO and you see that his eyes or her eyes go, boom. They ask themselves that question. And you wait 6 months and the entire organization flips. Okay? Everyone is happier, everyone's more energetic, everyone's more creative. Okay? And the bottom line is better, but that's not the point. The point is the bottom line, there are many ways to achieve the bottom line. The point is, if you're spending 30% of your daily heartbeats at work, how do you want that place to be?
Yeah. I think though, you know, if you think about it as your life, right? If you have a life that you think, okay, well, that was better because he was in it. It's only because every single room that you go in is better when you leave it, right? Because every day is made up of these little moments. It's not this one huge thing that you've made this change of. If we can have that intention every time you walk into a room to be like, I'm going to try and leave this room better than when I walked in one tiny little gesture, smile, whatever it is, conversation for someone, that can change an entire person's day, their trajectory of the day. You know, if you smile at that person that is really grumpy in the morning, who's a stranger in a shop, they may have had the most awful experience in the morning that you know nothing about. And then you shifting their energy could then shift their mind for the day to actually lead them to do something that has a happier day.
When I wrote Solve for Happy, my first editor, Peter Guzardi, was one of the best editors in the world. And he lived in New York. And so I used to joke with him and say, this is the shittiest city on earth. And you know, it's horrible and it's dirty and so on. But also nobody, you know, everyone is so grumpy and so aggressive. And Peter, in one word, he was the nicest, kindest guy. In one word, he said, smile. I said, what do you mean? And he said, just smile at them. If you go through the door and the porter standing in front of the fancy hotel is serious, smile at him and see what he does. Smile at the barista, okay? And oh my God, like angels come out. Those people literally would be the nicest people on earth. Nobody respects them, nobody acknowledges them. You know, life is tough for them. And so of course they're standing there serious. Just give them one human connection, just one drop. And by the way, if you're in the neighborhood, that one drop will make them smile at you for the rest of your life. That's how life should be.
Okay, this is a good question. This is for both of you. How do you balance ambition, success with well-being? You know, we talk about work-life balance. My uncle said something interesting. He said work-life harmony. I like that word a bit more because he said, you know, now you're not, like a phone is in your life to let you sleep. So it's more about harmony rather than, it's like work is part of your life today. So I think it's good to know what's the balance in your...
Yeah, I mean, I think, I love that phrase, right, that says success is loving what you do and loving who you are whilst you do it. And so if you don't love the person you're showing up as because you're grumpy and you're tired all the time and you're exhausted and you're snapping at your loved ones and you are that boss that comes in and everyone's like, oh God, he's here. Not you. But then it's like, well, is that, you know, how are you measuring that success against the success that is that tangible success of your business and your finances and all the rest? But I think if you are not feeling successful in yourself and loving, you know, the way that you're thinking, loving the way that you're feeling. And I'm not saying you have to feel great every day because we're human, right? We have to accept that you are always going to feel negative emotions, but they can come in and pass, and we can actually like learn to talk to an uncomfortable feeling. But if you are more than often not liking who you are because of either the state that you physically feel, mentally feel, emotionally feel, or who you're even showing up as in the world, then your balance is off. And so if you think about that, it's like, well, if your balance is off and you're not happy with who you are, the world around you isn't happy with who you are, you're still not going to get the results that you want in the way that you think you can as well, because the good results don't come from the stressed version of you. They come from the calm, happy version of you. We just have that warped sense of illusion, essentially, that we think that's going to be the version of you that gets what you want, gets all the results, gets your team to be the best. No, the one that really is authentic. You know, we talk about this with leadership. It's, you know, an authentic leader is the most magnetic leader. And that authenticity, because when you authentically know who you are and you can show up in the best way that is you possibly, you know, everyone has different traits, you know, not even like weaknesses and strengths. It's like what makes them unique as a person. And when those traits, your actual authenticity is shining through, that becomes magnetic to whoever you're around. You know, you want to be around that person because it's so blindingly obvious that they're not trying to be someone that they're not. And I think of that with like leadership, and, you know, we talk about that a lot, as if you're authentically yourself as a leader and you're showing up as the best version of yourself, you're going to motivate the people around you because they're going to want to work hard for you because they want to work with you. And I think it's like knowing like that version that's showing up every day, you have to really get really honest with yourself, even at the end of the week, and just think, okay, well, is this version of me this week the version, if I died at the end of this week, would I be happy that this version of me this week was the last one everyone saw? Yes or no? If it's no, like continually too many days in a row, let alone weeks, because weeks are a huge chunk of our time in a year if you think about it, then it really has to change that balance. And it's about, it doesn't have to be huge. You know, a lot of people think like, oh, I don't have 2 hours a day to do stress management. No, of course you don't have 2 hours a day. But
if Coldplay played in Abu Dhabi, he'll go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah? He'll have 2 hours for Coldplay.
But that could be stress management. I find Coldplay very stress-free.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like making that time and being serious about, okay, what time do I need to dedicate to myself this week to make me the version that's my most authentic and my best version?
I love that Saturday thing.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like an audit.
But that's outside work, right? So that's your audit that you do with your life when you're done working, because we chose Saturday.
But you can audit your work?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, right? But
You know?
there are tricks that need to happen as habits, okay? So I'm sure you read Atomic Habits.
No, I didn't actually. I bought it. I didn't read it.
Yeah, I didn't read enough of it because the idea is obvious at the very beginning. It's like, don't have big habits, have smaller habits, and then keep track of them. But it's really a lifestyle question, and I want to talk about two things. One is what Alice covered, which is what I call the path, right?
Okay.
And the other is you know, what part should go to the other. So let's cover those two very quickly. Zen teachers will take a pendulum and show you that if you hold the pendulum upright, okay, it will dangle and be straight. If you push it, apply force to it, it will go off its balance. Off balance is, to get anything off its balance, you have to apply force to it. And believe it or not, even if the force is just a tiny push with your finger, if I tell you to keep that pendulum off balance for a month, your finger will really hurt, your arm will really hurt, right? And so accordingly, balance is the point of least resistance. It's the point where you have to apply no force whatsoever for you to be at that point, okay? This is what Alice talks about, which is your genuine, authentic self. For you, if you find your genuine, authentic self in your team dynamics, in your leadership style, in your part of the job that you like, in your parenting style, in your communication style, in your love language with your partner, in every one of them, if you figure it out and find what is the point of least resistance for you, then connect all of those points. This is what Zen Buddhists will call the path. Okay? The path is a way of life that requires zero effort. That doesn't mean it's not productive. It means it's so aligned to who you are that it requires no effort at all. Okay? So I will tell you openly, I am a good businessman. I really am. And I achieved quite a lot as an executive and a business leader in the corporate world. But it's not my least resistance point. My least resistance point is this. Is to obsess about a topic okay, have enough passion for it, research it really deeply and communicate it to the world. That to me requires zero effort. Zero, as a matter of fact, it energizes me, right? So when you talk about work-life harmony, I love that term. It is about, first of all, it's about finding all of those points of zero resistance, okay, or least resistance. Like Alice said, by connecting deeply, and I really think we should talk about how to connect to your intuition and spiritual, to remove spiritual stress. But once you find those, and that requires a lot of internal work, okay, life becomes in total balance, right? The other advice I give as someone who worked for 30 years in the corporate world to the top level is take your life to work, don't take your work to life. Okay? So work is this very simulated environment where you have to show up and use 3-letter acronyms and repeat what the boss is telling you and talk about synergy and productivity, and oh my God, it sounds so unreal and so superficial that we lose ourselves. Okay? If you lose yourself, then there is work and there is life, and you need to find balance. I tell people, bring life into work. Okay? Treat humans as humans, not as colleagues. Right? If you're emotional today, work on your emotions. Again, definitely something we want to cover quickly if we can. How do you let those emotions talk to you instead of beat you down? Okay? You know, at work, again, when we do Unstressable at work, first people go like, ooh, emotions, we're not allowed to talk about those. And then Alice explains that, the fact that you don't talk about them doesn't take them away. They're still there, There's no one around this board table, unless they're a total narcissist, that doesn't have emotions, right? And so the idea is, bring your emotions to work. Don't bring the bad actions that result from emotions to work. Okay, I had one of my most respected colleagues at Google, was a genuinely incredible engineer who worked at a very, very high level in lots of research institutes. And she came to Google, and she was used to bosses, saying what to do and, going out there and doing the best, that is possible. Google doesn't work like that. Google, everyone does whatever the F they want, and something comes out at the end. At least that Google then, right? Anyway, one day she comes to my office, and we were very good friends. We were in different departments, so no reporting lines or whatever. She comes to my office and she said, Mo, I need your advice. And I said, yeah, go ahead, what's going on? And she burst crying, completely out of control. And she's a very composed, highly intelligent, engineering vice president. And I knew her really well as a person. I knew how emotional she is and how, feminine in her approach outside work she is, and so on. And I sat there and I listened as a good friend, and I was like, what's going on, and so on. And then I said, can I suggest something weird? She reported to Alan Eustace at the time, who was our VP of engineering, wonderful human being, okay? I said, have you told Alan this? She said, of course not. I'm not allowed to tell Alan this. I'm here just to share it with you, you're my friend. So I said, if you really believe in me, book an appointment with Alan before you get back to the building, okay? And now that you've let it out, speak to him about it. So she said, great idea. She goes, speaks to Alan half an hour later, and she bursts crying, okay, in the meeting, which is a massive no-no at work, isn't it? And Alan basically looked at her and said, oh my God, I'm really sorry. I did not know it was that stressful. I thought that because you didn't tell me, okay, that things were okay. And everything flipped, right? I'm not advising that everyone does this, because not every boss is Alan, right? But there is a way for you to feel the emotion, to deal with the emotion, to bring yourself to work. If one day, my wonderful Hannah, for example, my wife yesterday, was not feeling very well, and she's a very, very serious therapist on Friday. So she has 8 clients on Friday, and she's, I don't care, Mo. If they're expecting me, I'm going to be there. And I was like, Hannah, Bring yourself to work. You're not feeling well. They love you. Just tell them, I'm really sorry, I can't do it today. Can we meet on Monday? Right? All of these little things that move us away from being mechanical. Bring yourself to work. Deal with people as humans. Deal with yourself as human. Right? Don't overreact to emotions, but bring your emotions and analyze them and work on them and share them if you need to. But don't bring your work to home. Okay? Don't bring your life, your work to your life. Okay? Once you're done with work, you need to have very strict guidelines. I promise you, I know you have that as much as I do. I sometimes get some incredibly senior, very, very important, very influential people calling me at 10 p.m. Okay? And most of the time, I let the call go, and then I text and I say, I'm really sorry, is it okay if I call in the morning? Okay? I don't even send an explanation. But 10 p.m. is my time, my family time. And if you don't bring your work back there, that's when balance happens. Okay? And most of the time, by the way, if your boss tries to reach you at 10 p.m. and you say, can I call you in the morning? And your boss says, oh my God, you're so lazy, you're in the wrong job. It's as simple as that. Okay? And my advice to you, instead of conforming to the boss requirements, okay, to spend the next 6 to 8 months looking for another boss. Don't bring your work to life, because that completely destroys the balance.
You know, Mo, my therapist said something interesting the other day. He said, everything we don't accept about ourselves causes internal stress.
Oh, yeah.
So you know that we're talking about authenticity and bring your authenticity and the alignment of one's work.
Spiritual stress.
We're aligned, we are not so sad, but if we are not able to express ourselves the way, or we're not accepting the parts of ourselves the way they're supposed to be, or the way God created them to be expressed, then your internal conflict in all those parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's like we put that in the book actually. There's a model called SAL, they call it, which is see, accept, love, right? And that's in spirit. See as in like to see, S-E,
Okay.
and then accept and love. And it's about looking at that authenticity, and that's the shadow side as well as the lighter side, and integrating that, but also accepting it and loving it. And a lot of us, most of us, we look, but we never truly see, right? We just look at what we want to see, like the good, and we'll push away the parts that we want to hide, either from ourselves or from other people for fear of being judged or even judging ourselves, and not accepting that. And so it's looking at, okay, what can you actually see, both flaws and attributes that you love, and how can you accept both sides? Because even the other side of love, things that are great, sometimes we don't even accept those in our own self. It takes another person to tell you, you're really great at that, for you to sometimes believe it. And so when you can look at both sides and actually truly see yourself, because again, I think, one of the greatest feelings in the whole world that we have is when another person truly makes us feel seen, right? And you think, they really know me. Oh my God, I've really hidden that side of myself, and they saw it, or they brought it out more. It's one of the most empowering feelings in the world. But then if you can do that for yourself as well, right? If we can actually internally look at all parts of ourselves and really look at the good and the flaws. I'm not even going to say bad, but just, the sides that are that shadow side, and start to accept them and love the entirety of ourselves, then you can really move through that. And like you say, it's that acceptance piece and really looking at it as a whole.
What more do I have for both of you?
You need to see us, accept us, and love us. See us, accept us, and love us.
I am. Okay, I'll narrow it down. We're at 2:14.
Oh my God, it's more than 2 hours already.
Yeah.
It's you, of course it is.
Okay.
What does that mean, Alice?
But it's all valuable, so we never
Exactly.
complain. You describe, Mo, I think you described stress as an addiction. Why do we keep inviting it back into our lives?
Why do we invite any kind of addiction into our life? Because of psychological discomfort, right? So of course, other than the medical justification for it, but if you take any bad habit that you keep going back to, ignore drugs and others, like swiping on Instagram, The reason you do that is not because you're enjoying it. The reason you're doing that is because you're trying to escape an uncomfortable feeling. Okay, so if you know, again, one of the things we teach in Unstressable is what we call digital detoxing, right? Basically, how do you make technology work for you and not against you? So to understand how to digitally detox, you have to learn that the reason you switch your phone on 200 times a day is not because that's something you need or because it's something you enjoy. Okay, don't lie to yourself either way. You're not enjoying it, and you don't need it. You don't need 200 times a day. The reason you do that is because you're escaping an uncomfortable emotion. It could be a fear of missing out. So you keep switching your phone because you're looking for a specific email or a notification. It could be loneliness, right? So you're trying to switch on your phone to see other humans to get a simulation of a connection. Okay, it could be boredom. Boredom is the most interesting emotion on the planet. Boredom is there because it is an emotion that is supposed to make you feel that you're underwhelmed with the world, and the objective of it is to trigger you to do something to make the world less underwhelming, right?
Be creative.
Be creative, right? And so, but when you're bored, what do? You switch on your phone because you don't like that feeling. Call it negative. It's not negative. No feeling is negative. Every feeling is giving you a signal, but it's uncomfortable, right? And so when you learn that this is the reason why you're addicted to stress. So a lot of us are addicted to stress because fear of missing out would look like if I don't work hard enough, or if I don't appear stressed in front of my boss, okay, or if I smile while walking in the corridors, they'll think that I'm paid too much, right? And so basically that fear makes you work harder, try more, appear more stressed, become more busy. It's there. You could basically, and I say that openly to a lot of my friends. You know how they tell you, oh, don't retire because if you stop working, you're gonna die?
I say that honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That basically means that work is your escape.
And I say that because it seems so, especially men,
Yeah.
they attach their worth and their value to the service they've been providing for the last 40 years.
100%.
The moment they cut that off, they feel useless, and that's why they deteriorate and die quicker.
Yeah, so believe
But it's
it.
a very risky thing. Like your worth, it's like you said, I think earlier, you said if at your deathbed you have to associate your worth to a title, or I think something along those lines you said.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, label,
Then that's a problem that you...
Correct.
You didn't...
And believe it or not, that's something we work with senior executives on, right? Because the idea is, if you're in that hamster wheel, you're basically telling yourself that I define myself by the amount of work I do, not by the impact I leave, not by the joy I get out of it, not by the connection or appreciation I get. It's by the amount of work I do. That's a very, very, very misled association, right? And so because of that, we continue to work harder. A lot of people who are in that space will not only never stop working, but they will never take a vacation. They will never stop working after 8 p.m. when they get at home. They need to keep that mind busy. You know why? Because they can't talk to it.
Because they
cannot talk to it. Because when they stop occupying that brain starts to tell them, you're a worthless piece of shit. Okay? And that, I always give that example. Remember when we spoke about that? COVID, in my mind, you had two types of people under lockdown. People like me and Alice who were, sorry to say, enjoying the F out of it. It was like peace.
Detox.
Yeah, it's like I don't have to travel as much anymore. I have more time for my meditations. I can work out properly, and it's wonderful, okay? And people who completely couldn't take it. Why? Because they always found their distraction in the outside world because they never wanted to hear their head talking.
Yeah, wallah. There is a weird statistic, something along the lines that I think the average amount of time somebody can withstand their mind is around like 15 seconds or something.
Oh, I can spend.
That's really scary.
I can spend the next 15
You know what I
years
do
with this piece
when I
of
go
shit,
into the
no
elevator?
problem.
I swear, this is what I do. I go to the elevator, I go stand, like I stand, and there are people, you know, everybody rushes, and I just do this, and I just watch.
Yeah.
And I swear, Alice, just count till 2. 1, everybody on their phone. And I'm like, it takes 30 seconds to get to your floor, but and by the way, there's this other phenomena now that it's called the double screen watching. So even when we watch football today, a lot of us, as soon as the free kick happens and or the ball goes out of bounds, what do? You take out your phone. And I'm like,
no, it's crazy.
And I talk to myself, I'm like, bro, it's just a throw-in. You can actually not touch your phone and wait till they throw the ball and continue watching.
And there
even in TV shows, the moment the suspense goes, you go. And it's so scary.
I don't even know what that is.
Like we're allergic to boredom and no suspense.
Yeah.
The average person now touches and swipes their phone over 2,500 times a day, studies show.
How much?
Over 2,500 times a day.
Touch the phone. It's like
tap and
are you
swipe
here,
and
darling?
tap. It's crazy.
It's scary.
It's really scary.
Like what happened to Nokia with the game Snake on it? That's it.
That was it.
But you see, so again, one of the things that you teach very well is that morning routine. I have to say, I wasn't like that before we worked together. But now my phone will not be touched for the first hour of the day.
Yeah, do you think this is a good thing? Like I read about it.
100%. So I'll be very honest, just so that nobody thinks I'm a Zen monk. Okay. When I wake up, I look for 1 second, like 10 seconds. I just look at the people who sent messages to me.
Or if there's something urgent.
If there is something urgent.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I put my phone down, and I have a habit tracker. Okay, that I celebrate. I am now 78 days with my morning buffer maintained, which basically means I do not touch my phone for the first hour.
Hello.
Now, take that and tell yourself, of course, if you have to run to work, remember, my work is at my desk, so I don't have to run to work. But if you have to run to work, don't touch your phone until you get to work, okay? Check if there is anything urgent. But don't look at it while you're driving. Don't look at it before you come out of the phone. No phone in the bathrooms. Anas, please.
It's the only moment of like no distractions.
But that believe it or not, is again a moment of I'm uncomfortable to be there doing nothing. I might as well occupy myself.
Is it that, or is it? Finally, nobody's coming in the office to say, can I ask you something?
Oh.
Like there's no noise in the bathroom, literally. So you can actually say, this is what I'm focused.
So I used to have in my office, I used to have a little sign.
Yeah,
okay,
don't come in sign?
That basically said thinking.
We have one of the HR, she has a bunny that goes red or red on.
So I used to hang that on the door and say thinking. And when people saw it and opened the door and said, do you have a minute? I would say thinking.
Nice.
Okay, and very, very quickly the team learned that if they have thinking, sometimes they would still walk in and say, no, but I really need you, it's urgent. Yeah. Okay, otherwise they just leave me thinking.
I think as well, like you talk about that phone thing, it really does matter because obviously, everyone might have different mornings, right? You might have a child running in and scream at you, that takes your immediate attention, whatever it is. But the phone, if that is within your control and that's the first thing you see and you can actually not go on it even for half an hour, it doesn't have to be the first hour. What you're allowing yourself to do is to not have the world manipulate your first thought processes, right? It's deciding where your attention goes instead of you deciding where you want your attention to be. And that should really be internally at that part of the day. That inner world should be the most important part of your morning so that you can actually completely align yourself, like with your mind, your heart, your soul, and really connect yourself so that you can show up in a much better way. And when you're not reacting to the outside world, we know that if you put your phone on straight away and you start going on all the different things that requires your attention, you actually put your stress response on into reaction mode instead of response more easily for the rest of the day. And that's when we don't have that space.
Even
right?
if they like using the phone for the dopamine hits that they're getting,
Yeah.
even then it's bad.
Yeah,
100%.
because it's still what you're getting on the phone. It's not what it's giving you in that temporary dopamine fix. It's like all the information, all the different things it's asking you to look at.
You do realize, though, that all spiritual teachings will teach you that silence is the path. Silence is the path. You know, I take 40 days of silence every year, right? But it doesn't have to be that. Even before I started that habit, I would take every other Sunday, I would do a mini silent retreat. So I wouldn't touch anything in the outside world for the first, until my alarm goes off at 3 o'clock, right? Total silence, right? And believe it or not, just half an hour, if you're sitting in a cafe, half an hour of silence, just give me that one time, try it, okay? The most incredible thoughts come in your head. You just, like, last year I completely revamped my entire financial approach, okay? How I allocate assets and whatever. Literally because I was sitting in a cafe and I said, not doing anything. I have my little tablet, okay, that I write on, so it's not connected to the internet. And I said, okay, just gonna wait and see what happens. And flipped my entire approach of 35 years. I find myself immediately writing down 7 bullet points, saying these are things that are not going well, okay? Then immediately writing 7 other things that say, here is how I fix this one, here is how I fix this one. Just 1 hour of silence.
Okay, Alice, is there a different way that men and women deal with stress, or is it a general rule, like it's applicable on both genders?
Oh God, thank you for asking, Alice. that would have put me in trouble. You go ahead.
You'll probably hate me before I say it. I think, it's interesting, right, in the difference between how the feminine side and masculine response, because men, and this is a generalization and people might be like, that's not me, but a lot of people will say that is my partner, even if they don't realize it.
Even if the partner is not aware.
Exactly, but men tend to really, withdraw and go quite insular when they're stressed. They want to deal with everything themselves. And that can also cause a huge amount of conflict in partnership, because women want to do the opposite. They love to be in community and talk about it, and even just hold space to have a conversation where they're just saying what they want to at their partner. Their partner will try to give them a solution. They don't want the solution, they just want to be heard. And it's that difference, right, where equally a woman can annoy a man when he's stressed because they want to try to help them, and a man doesn't want the help, he's just trying to deal with it himself in that kind of like head down way. So I do think, there's a huge, huge disparity in how we initially go about dealing with the stress, but the feelings that we create and the responses internally are exactly the same, right? It's that overwhelm, irritation, or whether it's, feeling exhausted or whatever it is, that's all the same. But our initial response and how if we're not aware, right, of being able to deal with our stress will be completely different. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the time, I see this, with, for example, with clients in the past, all my one-to-one clients when I used to do a lot of one-to-one were all men. Right? And that's really fascinating because a lot of men don't want to sit in a group and talk about how stressed they are, because they're like, no, I'm just going to deal with this myself, and that's fine. It's away from everyone else. Whereas, in our membership, we have men and women, 100%, but it's predominantly women because they love community. And it's really interesting, that difference. And I don't know if that's also an ongoing problem today of that shifting that narrative with men in the modern world of actually being able to say, like, you know what, hands up, I actually need some help. And if I actually spoke to all my male friends, they'd be saying the same thing. And that's, inwardly taking on way too much that causes so much depression and suicide later down the line, God forbid. And we know even in the UK.
That's also true. Suicide is much higher.
In the UK, suicide for men under, it's either 40 or 50 is the biggest killer above all diseases.
Oh, wow.
Which is insane. It's an awful statistic.
So sad and unnecessary if we
unnecessary.
Yeah. And I do think it's, like you say, it's like, even with my own dad, he wanted to fix all that himself. He did the classic stress response of like man withdrawing and I will deal with this my own, internalized it. And it's so, it is shifting that narrative, I think, for men to be able to actually be able to say, like, it's not like I'm having a huge breakdown, but like, I'm just not feeling good, or I'm feeling a bit stressed this week. What about you? And equally for women to feel like they can, speak in communities and, speak to each other. But like, I think the difference of understanding the other sex and how they want the response to be initially is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly even, it doesn't even have to be in your relationship. It can be with your friends. It can be with, your teams. What that person needs is really, differential. And, I even had it with like one of my best guy friends the other week. I was like, okay, I understand what state you're in. You're in the withdrawal state. I'm not even going to try and help you right now, and that's fine. And then he came back around like 3 days later and was like, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, I was waiting for that, because you know when to not push someone if you know what they're kind of on that level of men and female, what they need at that time is.
You know what I noticed really helps, and maybe it's applicable, is when I call someone, it's a new habit, I say, are you okay to talk for 3 minutes or 5 minutes? Yeah. Rather than, hey, I wanted to tell you something. It could be positive or negative.
Yeah. I love that.
That's really
nice.
But
and the same thing with your friend. If you say, it seems you're stressed, would you like to talk right now, or you want me to wait? Instead of, I think you need help, I want to talk to you. Like, it's already more stressful, because if he's not welcoming advice, you're adding stress. And I think this check-in with people.
That reminds me of, that common question, which I think is so well phrased. It's such a good question. It's like, when someone's in grief, you don't ask them, how are you? You say, how are you today? And that, it's like you're saying, like, do you have 5 seconds to speak? It's just like shifting that to make it like present and someone to actually open up in that moment to be like, what, today? No, I'm actually quite stressed today. It's not such a big question, you know?
The only additional point to what Alice has shared is how, where the stress is coming from. So, because the feminine is very, very sensual in terms of noticing so much more than what the masculine notices. When the feminine is stressed, there is not only one stressor. It's always, once the feminine, and by the way, feminine and masculine is not man and woman. It's not body parts. It's an approach to life, if you want. Once the feminine is stressed, it will be stressed by multiple things. Oh, but this is happening, but if I do that, this will happen. But, what will my friend feel if this happens, and so on and so forth. The masculine, unfortunately, tunnel visions, because one of the masculine qualities is linear thinking. So to think linearly, the ultimate destination of linear thinking is one thing. You want to think about one thing only. And so you tunnel vision, and accordingly you eliminate most of the input that might be needed to solve the problem. And one of the things that are very useful if the feminine is helping the masculine or the other way around is to understand that, is that the feminine will come up with a lot of stressful topics, and you should never ignore any of them, but you should just organize them and say, so how can we work on this one now? Right? The masculine will come up and say, this is the issue, and the feminine can contribute by saying, oh, but did you also recognize that this might have triggered this, and that your friend might feel that way, and so on and so forth. The other very, very big difference is that the feminine is a state of being, and the masculine is a state of doing. This is why, we men are advised when your, loved one is sharing with you, don't solve.
Yeah, but we're advised not to. But with a natural instinct.
A natural instinct is to say, okay, you're presenting me with a problem because you want me to do something about it, right? Yeah. The feminine is a state of being that is basically saying, I want to explain to you how I am, where I am, what I feel, okay? And I want to be that person now. I'm not yet thinking about solving it. I am this person, and I want to share that person with you. I want to be seen, right? And that's actually probably one of the biggest reasons for arguments between the feminine and the masculine, is that he will try to solve, she will try to share. He doesn't want to listen, she doesn't want solutions.
You slightly touched on Alice Burnout. Did you explain to us, do you feel you explained it as clearly as you'd like on catching the signs that we're reaching it? Like, for every person watching this and thinking, I think most people are not aware that they're reaching burnout until they are burning.
Yeah.
So how can we help people recognize that? Like, you're already on the wrong track. Just don't reach burning.
Yeah. I think, so it's that noticing that difference between the sort of when you're reaching, well, not reaching burnout, but like you say, when you're starting to simmer in a bit of burnout versus the stress that we talked about earlier in the different areas. And that simmering of burnout is often really related to a feeling of emotional and mental fatigue before it becomes physical fatigue, right? So if you are truly in that state where you just think, everything's an effort, like mentally everything's an effort and everything feels emotionally an effort, you feel emotionally drained all the time and you're just like making even a decision is, I can't even, decision fatigue is a huge thing, right? With a lot of leaders and stuff, because you have so many decisions to make in a day, they get home in the evening and, their wife or husband, whoever it is, asks them to decide which restaurant they're going to, and they're like, I can't make one decision, enough. And so it is like that feeling of fatigue, we all know we have it in different areas of our life, and if you feel mentally fatigued from just making decisions continually, even just thought processes, that seems too much, or you're in conversations and you're like, this is just tiring. Everything just feels more of an effort than it should do, simmering in the background, and that emotional draining. And then eventually your body will say, no, you're actually physically tired as well. But if you notice it in your mind and your emotional state first, that is honestly the biggest clue you can give yourself, because the body is when we really notice it and we're like, oh, I really can't get out of bed, I feel exhausted by this time,
You're about to break.
But when you realize it in your mind and your emotions, that's when you should be like, okay, what's stressful in my life? What can I limit? And what can I do to bring myself into a bit of rest and recovery?
Another very important process approach to this is on your Saturday review. If you see certain stressors that keep showing up every Saturday, that basically by definition means that they're piling up. So by the definition of what stress is, a tiger shows up, you react, you're fight or flight, or you're eaten, so it should end very quickly, right? By definition, if something keeps showing up and you're not eliminating it from your life, that basically means that when other things come on top, they're piling up to lead you to burnout.
So it's good to identify common denominators.
Whatever lingers when it comes to stress is going to wear you out.
Okay.
Let's see who's going to get tired first, us or him.
Last two first. I have last two.
We're unstressable,
Okay. If someone is always stressed, chronic stress, which we touched on, what's the first step to escaping it, and then how to maintain it? So let's start with one of you. How to first step to escape it, and then I think it's important how to maintain it.
It's a big question. Okay.
Yeah.
So
It's not an easy answer. I mean, okay, go ahead.
No,
If you know an easy answer.
I don't know an easy answer, because I think, so it kind of comes back to like put together everything we talked about in one way, but it's, okay, so if you're chronically stressed, continually chronically stressed, you have to become aware, right? Become aware of where your stress is coming from, limit the needless stress.
So that's a Saturday exercise, for example, one way.
Yeah, exactly. Saturday exercise, become aware of where your stress is actually coming from, get brutally honest about it. Once you're aware, then you can change things. So limit the needless stress. So cut out, even an exercise, I say to people, every single week, limit 3 micro stresses in your life, So that is changing your morning alarm to a soothing one instead of the aggressive factory setting that jolts you out of bed. I mean, I even said that to you. I had a new phone, and I have a meditation song that gets me out of bed, right? It's just like the background soothing music. It gets louder and louder.
I can
Waft out of bed now, and I'm a big sleeper. So like, if the alarm wasn't going to wake me up, people would be like, oh, it doesn't wake me up. I'm like, no, it does. I love my sleep. And the one time recently I had a new phone, and I for some reason didn't have this old song on it, and the factory setting came on in the morning. I have not felt like a shot of cortisol like that in a long time.
Is that the day you shouted at me?
It's like, that's a normal day. No, it's like a shot of cortisol, and I was like, oh my God, people actually do this without realizing every single day, right? And so we think these small things have no effect, but they actually have a huge effect, particularly over time. So if you can limit 3 needless stresses in your life every week, change it up, do the same one, add to it, build on it, that will have a huge effect. And then it's really, really starting to understand the 4 languages of yourself, right? Yeah. If you can tell your mind to actually, you know, like Mo always says, bring me a useful thought. And I start saying to myself, like, bring me a calming thought. You know, tell your mind to actually do what you want it to instead of spinning around in stress, and break those stressful thought patterns and actually speak to your heart and, you know, navigate your emotions and actually understand your emotional language instead of, you know, pushing away an emotion and getting more and more stressed and simmering in chronic stress and irritation, anxiety. Actually speak to that emotion. You know, we spend so much time pushing it away. All an uncomfortable feeling wants is your attention, right? So the quicker you move towards it, the quicker it will move away from you and will move through you, essentially. And so it's about getting curious. You know, if you can sit down and you're chronically stressed and you feel uncomfortable, if you can sit down with yourself for 10 minutes that day and just quite literally close your eyes, take a deep breath and go, okay, how do I actually feel today? And notice that emotion. So say it's fear or say it's anxiety. And you say, okay, where is that anxiety in my body? Because there's always a place in it. If you actually breathe deeply with your eyes closed, you can feel where that feeling sits in your body. Place a hand over it and then speak to it internally. So as if I was speaking to you, it's like naming that emotion, saying, okay, anxiety, what are you here to show me? Okay, so there's always a reason why an emotion's there. And a negative emotion is only ever trying to alert you to one of two things. Something outside of yourself that you need to take action on and change, or something inside of yourself that you need to process and heal. And so when you can speak to it to get to understand what it is that it needs, you know, if your anxiety is because you're like, okay, well, I need to do that thing today, and that's actually something that's tangible, take action, and it will simmer down. If it's something that's been triggered by something that you can't take action on, then that's something you need to process and soothe through yourself. So understanding those languages, right, it really is the key to dealing with chronic stress, because when you can navigate how to actually control your thoughts, navigate your mind, process your emotions, listen to your body, and then actually connect your soul, you won't be in chronic stress because those parts of you will be getting what they need from you.
I remember the pendulum.
Yeah.
So I guess once you do that, it's the more you're aligning your different
Totally, you become truly aligned, and that's when stress starts to not even evaporate, but like you say, we can't get rid of stress in the outside world, right? But you become more unstressable because you can deal with this in a different way, because when something stressful occurs, you don't allow your mind to tell you all the other million things that you should be stressed about around that situation. You can actually pause and control your mind and tell it to do something useful for you, or quieten it. Or, you know, whether it's soothe that emotion and not feel sat an uncomfortable feeling for a week and trying to, you know, distract yourself. And it's just like knowing those different parts of yourself and that language. I truly believe like that's why we created that 4 parts of it, because no one has looked at stress in that way. I don't know why we decided to, but it was just...
Yeah. Can I just add something that will make people who are chronically stressed angry with me?
More stressed.
No, hopefully not more stressed, but it is confrontational, okay? So I get a lot of people who will text me on Instagram or whatever and tell me how stressful their life is, right? And people who are chronically stressed, they share 2 very common characteristics. One is that they think this is normal, and the other is they think they have nothing to do with it. It's the world outside them that's stressing them, okay? And as long as you have those 2 beliefs, you're not going to do any of the things that you need to change. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you really, really, really think about it, someone that you're aware of is going through more stressful time than you. Okay? You're not the most stressed person in the world, and the universe is not out to get you. Okay? So, you know, the reason I got stuck in traffic today is not because life hates me. So life inspired humans to invent a car, then found oil in the Middle East so that Dubai gets established, and then roads get built, and then it called everyone and said, Mo's gonna be driving that street at 7 p.m., go get him, right? Life is not against you, okay? Life does not want to get you, okay? Everyone gets challenges. It's not normal to be chronically stressed, and you, believe it or not, can do something about it. Now, if you take that responsibility of, this is not how I should be, and I'm going to change, then I will say this 1,000,000 times, habit trackers. Okay? habit trackers. So like Alice said, if you're physically stressed, okay, so I'll tell you openly, when we wrote Unstressable, we would chat mostly over Zoom around the structure of a chapter, okay? And then one of us would go write it, and then the other would edit it. Alice wrote the physical stress chapter, and I got to read it, to edit it, and I texted Alice by page 4. I said, "Are you mocking me?" Like every little symptom and every single behavior in that chapter was me, okay? But I told myself that the neck pain and the indigestion, and that's normal for someone who has the lifestyle that I have. I travel so often, okay? And the first thing that I was taught is it's not normal. It's not how it should be, okay? There are humans that wake up and they don't have a headache every morning, right? And by the way, it's your responsibility, you can fix it. So I have habits in my habit trackers that say no sugar day, workout day, walk day, and long walk day, okay? And I track them. Long walks have to be 3 times a week, walk days have to be 6 times a week, no sugar has to be 6 times a week, and so on, right? Mental stress, I have a habit in my habit tracker called no social media day. I'm not reducing it to half an hour, I'm not reducing it to an hour, I do not touch social media. And that has to happen at least 5 of every 7 days, right? And you have to pinpoint the things that are causing you stress, and you remove them. For me, they might be as simple as no sugar, but for someone else, they might be, who is chronically stressed, they might be, it's because I bottle up my feelings inside. I don't share them, and accordingly, they explode eventually, or they eat me up from inside, okay? You go listen to Alice's teachings about how to talk to your emotions, and you start talking to your emotions, and you make it a habit. Every morning I will spend half an hour noting down my emotions, asking them why they're there, and acting upon them, sharing them if I need to, okay? Publicly, openly saying them just to myself. Even if I'm just in my room, I can simply say to myself, I really feel off balance today, okay? Or I really feel angry today. Just say it to yourself. And the reason I feel that way, say it. And if you can say it to the person that's causing you to be angry in a good, positive way, problem over. But you have to make that choice. It's not normal to be chronically stressed. It's not how we're intended to be. We're supposed to be stressed to run away from a tiger and then calm and sitting around the campfire, okay? And it's within your hand. It's not the outside world. The outside world is sending enough stress for every single one of us.
My last question is open. What is it to be truly unstressable?
Do you want to go first? Or?
I think it is it's part of the purpose of life. It's part of how we are supposed to be. Okay, nobody is never stressable. Okay, but most of the time, I have a friend of mine, Jimmy Nelson, who is an incredible photographer, who goes to indigenous tribes that have never seen humans, okay? Spends 6 months out camping outside their territory until they come and look at him curiously, and then he starts to introduce himself with no words, okay? Offers gifts and gets to know them and so on. And then eventually, after they welcome him into their tribe, he would then go back, get a translator, and speak to them. His objective is normally to take one photo of them that captures the essence of them on film, believe it or not. So that he takes that risk, that it was one photo, one shot. And in that process, I asked him and I said, Jimmy, have you ever spoken to them about depression? Okay? And he said, they don't even know the word. They don't know it. And I said, how come? They're living in the wilderness with the toughest environments, subjected to wild animals, infant mortality is very high, so every single one of them lost a child. And he said, yeah, they're in total harmony with life. Okay? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, one of those one-time photos, the tribe, to capture their essence, wanted the photo to be in front of the massive waterfall. Okay? But to get there was a 9 hours walk, so by the time we arrived, the light wasn't perfect. So they said, it's fine, we'll sleep here. So they go behind the waterfall and sleep on the rocks as the water is incredibly noisy around them. Okay? And he says, it's the best night's sleep of my life. I said, what do you mean? He said, somehow when you connect to life, when you are in flow, when you're back to your nature, okay, there's no stress at all. I think that's what it's like to be unstressable. It's to simply be in such harmony with who you really are, that life is welcome. Every single day is a wonderful day.
I mean, I agree. I do agree. I also think the other side for unstressable is, it's about being unstressable isn't about never experiencing stress, right? You're not Yoda on top of a mountain without a single stressful thought coming through your head, and that makes you unstressable. It's about being human enough to realize that you can bounce back and shift stress 10 times quicker. So instead of being someone who sits in chronic stress like we talked about for months, years on end, you can notice when your stress arises so quickly that you can shift it within 10 minutes, 5 minutes, half a day maximum, and not let it be a normal part of your life and not identify as this stressed person. And, I always think, with resilience with stress, it's not about withstanding, it's about understanding. And so when you can understand how to shift that in a very quick amount of time, that's what makes you unstressable. And you'll allow yourself to be the most calm, authentic version of yourself rather than the most stressed one that's just a normal part of your day.
Come on, we stressed you enough.
254.
Oh man, that beats the last one, doesn't it?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Man.